Chapter 83. I'm a little angry. As soon as he said this, Wang Ba and the others all looked at He Yan at the same time. Shi Tu had spent the most time with He Yan, so he knew that He Yan was a good-tempered person. Even when Wang Ba had tried to steal her meat bun, she had only defended her food. She had never seriously said that she was angry. But now, this monkey, who came out of nowhere, had actually made He Yan angry. Lei Ho laughed. Brother He, swords have no eyes. Don't take out your anger on me. You'll have to be able to hurt me first. He Yan smiled. He flipped backward and was already behind Lei Ho. His 9-section whip was like a long snake, nimbly swinging. Lei Ho dodged, but the whip seemed to have eyes. He didn't shake it off. Instead, it brushed past his cheek. In a split second, a red mark appeared on Lei Ho's face. Because it was the tail of the whip, there was no blood. Even so, Lei Ho's expression was very ugly. Brother Lei, swords have no eyes. He Yan hooked his finger at him. Don't take out your anger on me. Lei Ho didn't say a word. He held his long sword and rushed forward. His movements were skillful, and his murderous aura soared. He was completely different from the new recruits who practiced in the martial arts field. The tip of his sword was aimed at either He Yan's throat or He Yan's heart. It was very vicious. In contrast, the youth's movements were much gentler. He was originally thin and delicate, but he didn't seem tired at all. It was as if he had endless energy. He swept and entangled Lei Ho's sword, preventing it from moving forward an inch. He Yan didn't want to hurt Lei Ho's life, but Lei Ho didn't think so. She thought about it several times in her mind. It seemed that unless she completely defeated Lei Ho, as long as Lei Ho had one breath left, he would not give up and chase after her to snatch the flag. However, after exchanging blows with Lei Ho, it gave birth to a strange feeling in He Yan's heart. This strange feeling was indescribable, but it made her feel as if something had been overlooked, causing her to feel uncomfortable all over. While he was thinking, a saber and sword gleam came from the side. He Yan was startled and leaned back to dodge. His sleeve was cut open in a split second, and the wind leaked in. Lei Ho stared at her and said with bright eyes, "At this time, it seems like we shouldn't be distracted. I was just thinking about how to calm you down." He Yan said, "Brother Lei, are you a little annoyed that no one has told you?" Such blatant provocation, coupled with her smiling expression, could really make an ordinary person explode in anger. Lei Ho's face immediately darkened, and he raised his sword to stab. He Yan smiled slightly and threw out her long whip. The whip circled around her body like a long snake, and unexpectedly, the tip of the sword couldn't move an inch. She was still smiling. While smiling, she said, "Actually, you guys don't know, but I'm also quite good at using a whip." In an instant, the whip crisscrossed, sweeping forward and rolling, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, dazzling people's eyes. The young man's voice carried a cheerful tone, as if he wasn't at daggers drawn to fight for the flag, but was competing with his heart on the martial arts field. She spoke amidst the flying whip footwork. "This is called twisting the elbow. This is called deceiving the horse left and right. This is called the white snake's tongue. Sweeping dragon." Her movements became faster and faster. Wang Ba and the others had already stopped what they were doing and looked at her, as if they were shocked by her imposing manner. Originally on the martial arts field, they already felt that she was very powerful, but now it seemed that she had been holding back before. Lei Exen gritted his teeth, and his expression became more and more unsightly. He didn't put He Yan in his eyes. No matter how powerful a recruit was, he wouldn't be able to take care of everything. He Yan's saber, bow, and spear techniques were outstanding, but it didn't mean that he could defeat him. However, the young man in front of him used the whip so casually, as if he had already used it thousands of times. That was fine. Even if he used the same weapon well, it didn't mean that he could win in a fight. But He Yan was really too cunning. She had only exchanged a few blows with him, but she seemed to be able to observe his weak points and attack them specifically. In such a short time, he was unable to find He Yan's weak points and had no way to attack. Lei Ho felt apprehensive. The young man's smile became wider and wider. One whip after another, one whip after another. Lei Ho felt that the long whip in front of him was like a spinning wheel, but also like a hard and fierce steel rod. It was like a worm or a dragon, with endless changes. He couldn't help but feel a little dazzled. In this dazzling moment, he saw the long whip coming towards his face again. Lei Ho subconsciously used his sword to block it. In the next moment, the whip made a mischievous turn and went straight for his chest. Lei Ho knew that something was wrong, but it was too late. The whip seemed to have grown eyes, and it directly wrapped around the dozens of flags in his bosom and pulled them back. Lei Ho wanted to use his sword to block the long whip, but the long whip could be retracted and released at will. How could it be entangled by his sword? It slipped and fell into He Yan's hands. This is called the golden silk gourd. He Yan weighed the flag in his hand and said with a smile, "Thank you, Brother Lei, for tying it up for me." Lei Ho was conceited. He felt that none of the recruits on White Moon Mountain today could defeat him. Therefore, he was extremely arrogant when he put the flags. He directly tied them up with a rope and put them into his bosom. But at this moment, He Yan took them all away. He couldn't help but feel a trace of regret. If he had been more careful and separated them, he wouldn't have lost everything so quickly. Now that he saw that He Yan took them all away, Lei Ho could no longer maintain his gloomy face. Without saying anything, he rushed towards He Yan. He Yan retreated a few steps and said with a smile, "Once it's in my hands, it's mine. No one can take what's mine. What if I insist on taking it?" Lei Ho's murderous aura soared, his sword like a meteor. "Actually, I don't like to fight," He Yan sighed. "If you insist on taking it, then I can only beat you." The two figures collided in a split second. Wang Ba and Lei Ho's companions were already tired from fighting. Moreover, the flags weren't in their hands, so there was no point in fighting. They were already sitting under the tree, watching from the sidelines. In their hearts, they were very clear that this was a contest between He Yan and Lei Ho. Whoever won would take the flags. "Can you tell who's stronger between the two of them?" Lei Ho's companions asked. Jiang Jiao shook his head. "I can't tell." "Do you even need to ask?" "It's definitely He Yan." Wang Ba answered matter-of-factly. "Brother, why do you say that?" "I don't know. It's just a feeling." "Do you want pine nuts?" Huang Xiong handed him a pine nut. Thank you. "Oh, it's delicious." Before he finished eating the pine nuts, he heard a dong sound. Everyone looked forward and saw that the two figures had separated. Lei Ho's expression didn't change. The youth smiled and held a long whip in his hand. A sword was lying on the ground. "You lost," He Yan said. Lei Ho's expression was ugly. He didn't speak. After a moment, he said in a low voice, "You cheated. All's fair in war." He Yan picked up the long sword on the ground and returned it to him. He said seriously, "Your leg was injured by me. Rest here for an hour before you move. Otherwise, your leg will be affected and you won't be able to practice martial arts in the future." Lei Ho turned his face away and took the sword. He didn't want to look at her. "It's okay," He Yan patted his shoulder and said earnestly, "Victory and defeat are unpredictable. It's a man's duty to endure humiliation. It's just a battle for the flags. You're already very outstanding. It's a pity that you met me." She pointed at herself. "I'm the best." Wang Ba and the others had heard He Yan say this countless times. At first, they didn't care about it, but now, they were numb to it. Moreover, she wasn't wrong. He Yan called Jiang Jiao, "Let's go," and said to Lei Ho's companions, "You guys rest here and protect Brother Lei." That person looked at her in confusion. "You guys beat up so many new recruits on the mountain. When the new recruits come down and see that Brother Lei can't move, it's inevitable that they'll join forces to beat you back." "That's why I said," she said righteously, "don't think that evil is small." Lei Ho's group was left behind. Jiang Jiao and the others followed He Yan down the mountain. He said, "You cheated?" Huang Xiong couldn't help but ask, "How did you cheat?" "Actually, I wasn't trying to trick him, I was just purposely showing him a few flaws." He Yan shrugged. "He wanted my life, and I just wanted him to be unable to leave, unable to catch up to me. He misunderstood my intentions, so—" "That monkey isn't that strong," Wang Ba didn't comment. He said he was strong, but he lost so quickly. "That's where you're wrong." He Yan shook his head and laughed. "He really is strong. Among the new recruits of the Liangzhou Guard, if I wasn't there, he would be the number one. He Yan had fought with this person before. She didn't know what this person used to do, but he didn't look more than 20 years old. Thinking about it, he must have practiced martial arts for at least 10 years. His skills were profound, and his techniques were skillful. If there was a flaw, it would be that his killing intent was too strong. Even though he didn't take lives with his fighting style, it was very likely that he would seriously injure his companions. It was because his skills were too good that his method of capturing the flag was so simple and crude. However, capturing the flag was never a matter of setting up an arena. Whoever could fight to the end would be the winner. Even though Lei Ho was very strong, he had been fighting with the other new recruits on the mountain top, constantly going up and down the mountain. In the end, he still used up a lot of energy. When he fought, it was fine if it was only for a short time, but after a long time, his flaws became very obvious. He Yan went up and down the mountain today with the 5 of them. Wang Ba and the others also put in serious effort. Other than making arrangements, He Yan didn't really fight many times. Because she was full of energy, she also had enough energy to look for Lei Ho's weaknesses. He really won't follow? Jiang Jiao was still a bit doubtful and frequently looked back. I think we should go faster in case he follows. Don't worry, He Yan said, unless he doesn't want to continue practicing martial arts in the future, he won't follow. But what you said makes sense, we should leave the mountain as soon as possible. In the room of the city guard, a game of Go was still unfinished. Shen Han's mind was preoccupied, and he didn't have the mood to play Go. The youth in front of him didn't seem to be anxious at all, nor did he care about the outcome of the battle for the flag. He leisurely drank tea and played Go, so calm that it made one's hair stand on end. The black-clothed imperial bodyguard came in from outside, walked to Xiaoju's side, and quietly said, He Yan bumped into Lei Ho and fought with Lei Ho. Lei Ho wasn't a match for him, and now all 20 flags are in He Yan's hands. He didn't avoid Shen Han, so these words were also heard by Shen Han, who immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. That Lei Ho, from the moment he went up the mountain to fight for the first flag, he had been noticed by them. This young man didn't reveal himself before, and if it weren't for this battle for the flag, they wouldn't have known that there was such a capable fighter in the Liang Province Guard. This person was even recommended by Instructor Du's relatives. At first, they didn't see anything special about him, but now they knew that he had real skills. This person went up the mountain to fight for the flag, and fought with others without losing a single battle. He was different from He Yan, who hid in the dark and ambushed people. He only knew how to be straightforward, and didn't know how to hide. Fortunately, his skills were excellent, and he defeated countless people, taking 14 flags in one go, twice as many as He Yan. Originally, Shen Han was very much looking forward to the meeting between Lei Ho and He Yan. He really wanted to see who would win if the two really fought. Shen Han thought that He Yan was used to playing tricks, and that he might not be able to defeat Lei Ho if he directly fought like this. After all, Lei Ho's skills were indeed powerful. He didn't expect that Lei Ho would still be defeated by He Yan. He Yan's group is already walking down the mountain, Fei Nu continued. They can enter the formation in another hour. Shen Han looked at Xiaoju. At first, he thought that there was no need to use a formation against a recruit. But now, Shen Han only had one thought in his mind. This young man was omnipotent, and there was nothing he couldn't do. He was afraid that this formation wouldn't be able to trap him. Xiaoju's face was calm. She lowered her eyes and picked up Shen Han's white chess piece. Shen Han asked in a low voice, Governor, will he win? Xiaoju's lips curled up. Maybe. The sun was gradually setting in the west. The sunlight changed from the brilliant gold of the day to a warm red. It seeped through the gaps between the branches and leaves, like a large piece of red clouds, soft and bright, like the red muslin worn by a girl. Wild birds chirped from the depths of the forest. It was probably because they already had 20 flags in hand, and victory was in their grasp. The group was in a very good mood. It was as if they didn't come to the mountain to compete for flags, but came out to play. At this moment, they were preparing to go home. Wang Ba said, When we go back this time, other than the possibility of entering the vanguard, will we be rewarded with something? There should be. He Yen casually asked, "What do you want?" "What? Of course it's good wine. I haven't drunk much since I came here. I'm dying of thirst." Wang Ba complained, "If I could have wine to drink, I would have more strength than I do now. That's wine, not medicinal cuisine." He Yen found it a little funny. "Can you give me some good weapons?" Jiang Jiao said, "When I joined the army, I didn't bring any weapons with me. The long spear in the training field isn't very convenient to use. If I could be rewarded with a good long spear, that would be good." Huang Xiong touched the prayer beads on his neck and said, "I just want to eat hot beef. Drinking big bowls of wine and eating big chunks of meat, that's the way to live." Shi Tu pondered for a long time before saying, "Bring Xiao Mai up the mountain. He has always wanted to hunt rabbits." Out of the 4 people, 3 of their wishes were related to eating and drinking. He Yen didn't know whether he should praise them for having no desires. Jiang Jiao asked, "What about you? What do you want as a reward?" "I don't want anything." He Yen said, "If I can enter the Vanguard Battalion, I'll be very happy." "You're really thinking about making a name for yourself," Wang Ba said sourly. "Of course. I'm so powerful, wouldn't it be a pity if I didn't make a name for myself? I'm also hoping to be recognized by the governor and become his bodyguard or something." He Yen thought that if that was the case, he could meet Xiao Ju every day and find out news about the He clan. "Just think about it." Wang Ba rolled his eyes. "If you succeed, I'll call you Dad." He Yen, as they were talking, Huang Xiong stopped and said, "Have we been going around in circles? Why do I feel like we've been here before?" "Forget it." Wang Ba said, "Do you know the way?" "I also feel like we've been here before," Jiang Jiao said. He Yen didn't say anything. Shi Tu took out a straw rope from his pocket and walked to a tree in front of them. He reached out and tied it to a tree, saying, "The mountain path is complicated and the trees look similar. It's normal to make a mistake. Let's continue walking." The group continued walking. After walking for a while, they saw a tree in front of them. The straw rope that Shi Tu had tied to the tree was tied to it. This time, everyone was silent. After a while, Wang Ba opened his mouth. His voice trembled slightly. He said, "Are we going around in circles?" The more he spoke, the more excited he became. He rambled on, "I heard from one of the advisors on our mountain that he started walking on the mountain path the night before. When he reached a certain place, no matter how he walked, he kept walking in circles. He had no choice but to sit down and sleep in his clothes. The next morning, well, guess what happened?" He deliberately kept them in suspense, but no one answered him. Wang Ba said angrily, "When he woke up, he found himself in a graveyard." He Yen face-bombed. "Brother Wang, now is not the time to tell ghost stories. What are you afraid of?" Huang Xiong said in a low, muffled voice. "I have the Buddhist prayer beads. Demons and ghosts can't get close to me. But you," he turned to look at He Yen. "Did you remember the way wrong?" "No," He Yen said. "Then why did you suddenly get lost?" Jiang Jiao was also puzzled. Although Mount Baiyue was big, it wasn't to the extent of getting lost. They were fine when they came up, so how could they not find their way down the mountain? "We are indeed going down the mountain," He Yen said, "but we are also going around in circles here." A thought flashed through her mind and she walked to the tree with the straw rope tied to it. She looked around for a bit. This was a wild area. The trees were not as dense as the ones at the top of the mountain. The ground was overgrown with weeds, and there were a few pieces of Shi Tu scattered everywhere. "Shi Tu?" He Yan's heart skipped a beat. She walked a few steps forward and saw a pile of rocks. She bent down to take a closer look. A few huge rocks were randomly piled together without any shape. They looked like they were casually moved here by the hunters when they were resting on the mountain. "Why are you staring at this pile of Shi Tu?" Wang Ba asked. "Are there words on it?" He Yen straightened up and said, "There are no words on it, but this is why we can't get out." "What?" Jiang Jiao and the others also gathered around. They were all looking at the Shi Tu, but they couldn't figure out what it was. Shi Tu frowned and asked, "What is the meaning of this?" "Chimen Duanjia, the 8 gates of life, injury, rest, obstruction, view, death, shock, and opening. Someone set up a formation here," He Yen said. We entered the formation, so we are going around in circles. Everyone could understand her words separately, but they didn't understand when she put them together. Everyone looked at her. They didn't even know where to start asking questions. He Yan was also puzzled. There was no sign of Wang Xiaohan anywhere. This meant that Wang Xiaohan and the others had already gone down the mountain. They couldn't have broken the formation. This meant that there wasn't one before. Then why was there one now? Who set up the formation specifically for her? Shinhan? Or Xiaoju? Chapter 84. After a while, Wang Ba couldn't help but ask, "What is this formation you're talking about?" "It's a military formation. A general needs to learn how to use troops to set up a formation. The military formation was originally modified by the Chiman Duanjia." He Yan said, "It's a long story, but this formation, what's wrong?" Shirtu asked. "It's not a military formation. It's just a normal 8 trigrams formation." He Yan answered. She really didn't understand why there was a formation here. There wasn't this formation when they went up the mountain. Wang Xiaohan and the others didn't see it either. It seemed like it was prepared for them or for her. "What? Then, can you walk out of here?" Jiang Jiao stared at her face and asked. "Of course." This time, Huang Xiong was also surprised. "You even know how to do this?" He Yan smiled. "I only know a little." Her "only know a little" usually meant very well. Everyone was speechless. He Yan knew that there must be guards hiding in the dark to observe their situation on the mountain. At this moment, her words and actions were probably being watched by the eyes in the dark. She couldn't reveal that she wasn't good enough. Maybe Xiaoju specially set up this formation for her to test her ability? After all, she had never seen a flag battle where she had to break a formation. It seemed like it wasn't easy to enter the 9 Flags Battalion. If everyone in the 9 Flags Battalion knew how to break a formation, then the 9 Flags Battalion really wasn't simple. Xiaoju had such a strong cavalry. No wonder she was invincible. With that thought, she said, "Follow me. Follow the way I walk. Don't take a wrong step." He Yan was rarely this serious. Jiang Jiao and the others didn't dare to be careless. They followed He Yan's footsteps and slowly walked down the mountain. Huang Xiong asked as they walked, "Brother He, who did you learn this from?" He Yan smiled and said, "My master is a master." "I thought so too." Huang Xiong nodded. "Your master must be a peerless master. Otherwise, how can you know everything?" He Yan lowered her head and smiled. She didn't answer. In fact, General Fei Hong was brave on the battlefield. It wasn't rare. The world didn't lack of heroes who weren't afraid of death. Although she was skilled, she wasn't the best in the world. She didn't need to mention fighting a group of heroes by herself. General Fei Hong was best at arranging troops and formations. Her master was indeed a peerless expert, but as a woman, she was born inferior to a man in terms of physical strength and physique. One must know how to play to one's strengths and avoid one's weaknesses. If one could learn how to arrange troops, deploy troops, and dispatch generals, it would be much more effective than if she went to the battlefield alone to fight. Her master was most proficient in the art of divination, so she learned it and combined it with the art of war. Finally, she became a famous general of her generation, Fei Hong. Generals should learn how to train troops and set up formations, but why did the 9 Flags Battalion have to learn this as well? He Yan couldn't figure it out. She couldn't find a clue. She could only give up and walk down the mountain. Actually, she could directly break the formation here and destroy it. However, He Yan wasn't sure if the formation was prepared for her. If it was prepared for someone else and she destroyed it, what would happen to the people who came after her? Therefore, she led Jiang Jiao and the others out through the life gate. Breaking the formation was as easy as flipping her hand for her. She was familiar with it. However, in the eyes of the secret watchers, it was a big deal. Ma Damiai and Liang Ping were hiding in the dark. When they saw He Yan and the others leave, they opened their mouths and looked at each other. They saw the surprise in each other's eyes. "He left just like that?" Liang Ping stuttered. "As if nothing happened." Ma Damiai said. He Yan didn't even stop to think. He didn't think about how to break the formation. He just glanced at it and knew how to get out. They actually had such a person among the new recruits. Until now, there didn't seem to be anything that could stop him. This should have been a good thing. He was a heroic young man who was outstanding. Anyone who had such a hero under their command would feel that they were lucky for several lifetimes. However, the current situation was complicated. She didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse based on Chief Instructor Shin's words. The forest was dense. Half of the sun had already set. He Yen and the others walked out of the formation. She stopped and looked back. The formation made of shirtu and dried branches was so blurry that she couldn't see it clearly. "Are we walking out?" Wang Ba asked. "That's right." Wang Ba was happy. "Damn it. There's nothing to stop us this time, right? I estimate that we'll be down the mountain in less than an hour." Jiang Jiao was also happy. "It's almost over." He saw that He Yen was still looking behind them. He asked, "Is there anything wrong?" "Nothing." He Yen shook her head. She still felt that the formation was inexplicable. When she fought with Lei Ho, there were also some strange places. These discomforts were like small stones falling into her boots. It made her panic. It made it difficult for her to feel happy. She only felt that she had overlooked something and was somewhat uneasy. "It's getting dark. Let's go down the mountain early," Huang Xiong said. He Yen collected her thoughts and only said, "Let's go." The sun didn't pass by Yu Mountain and fell into the Wulu River. Half of its body sank into the river. The water surface was bathed in the setting sun. It was as if a woman's makeup box was opened and pearls were scattered all over the surface. The pot of tea in the room was already cold. It was evening. The wind was soft and the curtains were green. The autumn scenery was far away. Two people were playing chess. One of them was anxious and the other was calm. Someone walked in from outside and said, "The first team is down the mountain." Shen Han looked at Fei Nu and waited for Fei Nu to say the name. "It's He Yen." With these 3 words, Shen Han's body leaned back slightly. His entire body relaxed. This result was both unexpected and reasonable. He had long guessed that this would be the result, but he had some doubts. Now that his suspicions were confirmed, he was momentarily at a loss. The black piece was placed. The youth in front of him raised his head and said indifferently, "You've lost." "Shen Han, Governor's chess skills are superb. I'm ashamed of my inferiority." In this half-day, he hadn't won once. He didn't know why Xiao Ju was in the mood to play chess like this. "Governor, they've gone down the mountain. Should we reward them now?" "No need," Xiao Ju curled her lips. "Du Mao will do as he sees fit. 5 days from now is the Mid-Autumn Festival. We'll reward them on that night." Regarding the Vanguard Battalion, should we let He Yen enter? Shen Han asked hesitantly. He Yen had already won first place. Naturally, he should enter the Vanguard Battalion. But his identity was suspicious. Right now, they didn't know if he was a friend or foe. Wasn't it a bit inappropriate to hastily agree? No. The youth stood up and looked at the osmanthus trees outside the window. The osmanthus trees had bloomed, and their fragrance assailed their nostrils. Together with him, he looked like a gentleman. He said, "Let Lei Ho enter the Vanguard Battalion." After the battle, they came down from the mountain and arrived at the city guard station in less than an hour. There were a few torches outside the martial arts practice field. Everything was as peaceful as before. There was no instructor guarding the door. There was no scene of celebration as they had imagined. They looked at each other in dismay. "I thought there would be a celebratory feast." Wang Ba was a bit dissatisfied. "Why isn't there anything?" Just as they were speaking, someone in the martial arts practice field saw them and walked over. It was only when they got closer that they saw that this person was Du Mao. Du Mao wasn't as excited as when he saw them off. His expression was very calm. When he saw them, he asked, "Where are the flags?" He Yen took out a bunch of flags from her bosom. Her bosom was bulging from the flags. She suddenly handed them over to someone and felt much more relaxed. Du Mao counted 20 flags. That's right. Jiang Jiao was still a bit excited. He couldn't help but ask, "We should be first, right?" "We are first." Du Mao nodded and put away the flags. He said to them, "Go take a bath and rest first." Tomorrow morning you can rest for 2 more hours before coming to the martial arts practice field. You've worked hard today. He still didn't have any intention of rewarding them. Wang Ba asked, "That's it?" Du Mao looked at him. "What else do you want?" Wang Ba didn't know how to respond. He felt wronged for some reason. Du Mao said, "I'll go back first to report to the head instructor." "Don't stay here. You're all sweaty. Wash up and eat something." Then he didn't care about them and turned to leave. He was really heartless. Looking at Du Mao's back, they felt the night wind become a bit colder. Wang Ba saw that Du Mao had walked far away. Only then did he dare to point at his back and ask, "No, what's the meaning of this? He's just going to leave us here? He has to give us an explanation. So all our hard work for the whole day was for nothing." Huang Xiong and Jiang Jiao were also somewhat disappointed. Shi Tu said, "Maybe it's not today. After all, there are still recruits who haven't left the mountain." "That's right." He Yan also thought so. "We don't know when the last recruit will leave the mountain. Moreover, the head instructor needs to discuss the prize for a while. It's not something he can think of immediately." Wang Ba glanced at her and said sourly, "Of course you don't care. Your prize, entering the Vanguard Battalion, is definitely in the bag. Of course you can say that. When I enter the Vanguard Battalion, I'll go get you 2 jars of good wine." He Yan patted his shoulder and said seriously. Wang Ba shook off her hand and snorted twice, "I don't care what you say. Grandpa, I'm going back." They didn't live in the same house, so they went their separate ways at the martial arts practice field. When He Yan and Shi Tu returned to the house, the originally quiet house suddenly became lively. Xiao Mai was the first to rush up and threw herself in front of Shi Tu. "Brother, how was it? How many flags did you get? What rank did you get?" Shi Tu revealed a rare smile and said, "All of them." The house was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly cheered. He Yan was almost lifted up and thrown into the sky. Hong Shan shouted exaggeratedly, "All of them? You guys are too hardworking. Ahi, you're good. You got first place again. I think it won't be long before you don't live in this house anymore. I heard that the soldiers in the Vanguard Battalion eat and sleep better than us. Sigh, I'm so jealous." "Shi Tu, brother He, tell us quickly. How did you guys get the flags?" "That's right. There were so many recruits on the mountain. Did you guys fight? Did you have a good time fighting? You all got 20 flags. How could you not fight? You guys didn't seem to be injured. Are the others so weak?" He Yan could only say, "Brothers, let us eat something and drink some water first. I'll tell you slowly. Don't be impatient." As they spoke, it was already late into the night. Outside, they heard the recruits coming down the mountain one after another. Not a single one was missing. He Yan felt relieved. When it was late at night and there was no one around, he sneaked to the riverside to take a bath. The long summer was finally over. The river gradually became cold. He Yan couldn't help but shiver when he didn't get into the water. She was a little worried. It was still okay in summer and autumn, but in winter, she couldn't go to the bathroom with the recruits to take a cold shower. She didn't know how cold the river would be. The cold was secondary. What excuse could she use to explain why she didn't use hot water and instead took a cold shower in the river? Other people would think that she was crazy. Therefore, she had to enter the 9 Flags Battalion as soon as possible. Xiao Ju didn't lack money and he was also a young master. He wouldn't mistreat his confidant. It would be more convenient than now. He Yan's body gradually adapted to the cold. She splashed some water on her body and used Xiao Mai to wipe her spleen. All the new soldiers had already left the mountain and there was no news of anyone falling down. This also meant that the array on the mountain path should have been removed after He Yan and the others left. The formation was indeed prepared for her. He Yan thought that Xiao Ju really wanted her to enter the 9 Flags Battalion and deliberately tested her qualifications. Since that was the case, Xiao Ju should be satisfied with her after she passed the test. She would definitely enter the 9 Flags Battalion. In the future, she still needed to perform more. This way, the more satisfied Xiao Ju was with her, the more likely she would become his confidant. It would be best if she could become his right-hand woman. He Yan always felt that something was wrong when she fought with Lei Ho today. She thought about it but couldn't figure out what was wrong. Even now, she still felt the same. She could only shake her head and think of a reason to fight with this person again in a few days. Maybe she could figure out the crux of the problem. However, this person didn't show any mercy. She still had to be careful. Yen rinsed the foam off her body and wiped her body with a cloth. Then, she put on her clothes and walked back to her room. Ever since she bumped into Xiaoju at the Wulu River, Yen had to walk very far away every time she took a bath. She didn't want to bump into him again. No matter how she thought about it, she had been very cautious as a new recruit. The next day, all the recruits who went up the mountain the day before rested in their tents for 2 hours. Cheng Lisu came to find Yen. Young Master Cheng brought 2 round pomegranates for Yen. He sat cross-legged on her couch and said, "I only found out last night that you guys went to fight for the flags. My uncle locked me in my room for the whole day. I copied books for the whole day. If I knew, I would have come to see you guys." He leaned closer to Yen and said, "I heard that Big Brother got 20 flags. This time, you are the #1 recruit in Liangzhou." Yen smiled and opened the pomegranates that Cheng Lisu brought. The pomegranates were big and round. The insides were already ripe. When he opened them, each one looked like red crystals. Just looking at them made one's mouth water. Yen picked up a few and ate them. He answered, "I was just lucky. Big Brother, you are good at everything. You are just too humble." Cheng Lisu said seriously, "How can this be called lucky? You are very good." Since I am so good, Yen wanted to get some information from him. He looked at him and asked with a smile, "Do you think I can enter the 9 Flags Battalion?" "Of course." Cheng Lisu swallowed the word "of course." Originally, this was something that went with the flow and couldn't be more normal. However, Cheng Lisu still remembered that not long ago, when Xiaoju got the information from his mouth, his attitude towards Yen didn't seem to be one of admiration. "I think that, Big Brother, you have already proven to everyone that you are the #1 in the Liangzhou Guards. There is no doubt about it." Cheng Lisu carefully chose his words. "Any ordinary person would choose you to enter the 9 Flags Battalion." His words were very clear. Any ordinary person. However, Xiaoju was not an ordinary person. Therefore, no one could say for sure what the result would be. Yen did not detect the trap in Cheng Lisu's words. He was probably too confident in himself. After all, in this battle for the flags, she had already gotten all the flags. This was enough to show how good she was. Moreover, in the battle for the flags, Yen thought about it carefully and felt that his performance was very outstanding. He knew how to use people, how to set up traps, and how to use tricks. He did not lose when he fought against Lei Ho. Even Xiaoju's final formation was easily broken. Yen felt that even in Xiaoju's 9 Flags Battalion, he could be ranked 1st or 2nd. How could Xiaoju let go of such a good talent? She was very happy, so she did not notice that the happier she appeared, the more guilty Cheng Lisu appeared. "However, do you know when the rewards will be given?" Yen asked. "It wasn't yesterday. If it isn't today, then it should be in the next few days. You and your uncle are inseparable, so you should know a thing or two." Cheng Lisu sighed in relief. He could answer this question. She said, "Isn't it almost mid-autumn? On the night of the 15th of the 8th month, the rewards will be given in the barracks." Yen was slightly startled. "Mid-autumn?" Cheng Lisu sighed. "Time really flies. I feel like I haven't been in Liangzhou for long, and it's already mid-autumn." Yen looked at her. This usually energetic young man had a rare look of worry on his face. Yen asked, "Do you want to go home?" The worry on his face quickly faded. It was so faint that it made one wonder if it had even been there. Cheng Lisu flung her sleeves and said angrily, "How is that possible? Is it because Liangzhou's scenery is bad, or is it because my uncle is ugly? Why would I want to go home? I'm simply too happy here. I don't want to go back and get married." Yen. At this age, children usually yearned for more freedom. Cheng Lisu turned to him and asked, "Big Brother, what about you? Do you want to go back?" The young man lowered his eyes. The shadow of his body made it difficult to see his expression clearly. Her voice was also smiling, but there was a hint of disappointment in it. She said, "It's okay. I don't really miss home." The next few days were as usual. The discussion about the battle for the flag was only lively in private among the recruits. Everyone was talking about what kind of reward the first-place winner would receive. The instructors were very calm. They were very tight-lipped and did not reveal anything. The more they thought about it, the more excited they became. The autumn moon became more perfect day by day. In the blink of an eye, for days had passed and mid-autumn arrived. Chapter 85. The autumn geese flew diagonally across the sky, and the osmanthus trees gave off a sweet fragrance. The heat of summer had finally faded away, leaving behind only the coldness of late autumn. Early in the morning, when Yen woke up, Xiaomai handed her a pear. I picked it from the forest beside the training field. I've already washed it. Try it. Yen had just washed up, so she took a bite. It was so sour that her teeth almost fell out. Seeing her squint her eyes, Xiaomai scratched her head in embarrassment. The ones in the wild forest aren't very ripe yet. It should be sweeter after a while. But since it's autumn now, there are a lot of wild fruits in the forest. We can secretly pick a few every day after training. Marinate these sour pears with sugar and make them into rock sugar snow pears. They're very delicious. This child only thought about eating every day. Yen said, "There's no sugar here." Xiaomai was stunned for a moment, then she seemed to realize something. She said with some disappointment, "That's true." Not necessarily. Hong Shan, who had been watching them talk from the side, interjected, "Aren't we going to talk about merits today? You and Shirtu got first place in the competition for the flag last time. Who knows, there might be candy in your reward today. Maybe there's something delicious, like rock sugar snow pears." When this was mentioned, Xiaomai suddenly became excited. She said, "That's right, Ehigo. We're going to talk about merits tonight. Have you thought about what you want?" "I can't get whatever I want." Yen smiled. "The garrison isn't the capital, so there's a shortage of resources. He just wants to enter the vanguard battalion." Hong Shan also took a bite of the pear and said vaguely, "This request will definitely be fulfilled." Yen smiled. These past few days, although she appeared very calm, in the end, she was still somewhat excited. Once she entered the Nine Flags Battalion, it meant that she was one step closer to Xiaoju. She would also be able to openly deal with the He clan's matter. Thinking about it, she would be able to fulfill her wish tonight. Up until now, her path in the army had been quite smooth. After all, being a General Fei Hong was something that people would fight over no matter where she went. Yen felt a little proud. During the day, he went to the martial arts practice field as usual. However, at night, everyone was admiring the moon in the open space near the foot of the mountain outside the martial arts field. Liangzhou was not like the capital. Naturally, it would not be like the wealthy families of the past. They would either hold banquets in their own courtyards, restaurants, or pleasure boats. They would invite their colleagues and friends and fill the table with delicacies. Admiring the moon in Liangzhou was nothing more than lighting a bonfire. The recruits would sit in a circle and eat something rare. Perhaps there would be rice wine. His companions bragged, gossiped, drank wine, ate meat, and looked at the moon. That was all. In the afternoon, Yen went back to his room and changed into a clean set of clothes. The new recruits of the Liang Province Guard had uniforms for spring, summer, autumn, and winter. They could wear spring and autumn clothes, and there were 2 in total, 1 red and 1 black. The style was simple and resistant to dirt. Yen changed into a red one and went to look for Cheng Lisu. Cheng Lisu had already come to the martial arts arena in the morning and told Yen to look for him in his room in the evening. Yen guessed that Cheng Lisu wanted to give him something to eat. As expected, when he saw Cheng Lisu, the young man handed her a mahogany basket. The basket was exquisitely made, and there was an image of Chang, flying to the moon carved on top. When he opened it, he saw neatly arranged moon pastries. The fragrance assailed his nostrils. They were beautifully made and seemed to be delicious. "Dage, this is for you," Cheng Lisu said in a small voice. "The moon pastries distributed by the Liang Province Guard are too rough. I'll give you the one someone gave me." Yen said, "Thank you." In reality, she was not particularly interested in pastries. However, if she gave this basket of moon pastries to Xiao Mai, the child would probably jump for joy. You've never eaten this before, have you? A trace of sympathy flashed through Chung Lisu's eyes. She was also a bit proud. This is not the best. The pastries from Shuo capital's Zueyu restaurant are the best in the world. In the future, when we return to the capital together, I'll treat you to a meal at Zueyu restaurant. I'll tell you a secret. Chung Lisu said as if she was presenting a treasure. My uncle also likes the food at Zueyu restaurant. Hiyen thought that Chung Lisu was the same as He Yunxing. She worshipped and admired Xiao Ju unconditionally. She thought that if she received Xiao Ju's approval, then she would not be bad. However, to be honest, Xiao Ju was indeed not bad. After he thanked Chung Lisu for her gift, the sky gradually darkened. Hiyen carried the basket of pastries out the door. At this moment, a bonfire had already been lit in the wilderness at the foot of the mountain. The bonfire was bright. Many new recruits had already arrived and were sitting on the ground near the bonfire. It was said that every new recruit would receive meat pies and oranges. There were also wooden sticks set up near the bonfire. Rabbits and fish were strung on them. It was obvious that they had been hunted on Baiyue Mountain. It seemed that there would be meat to eat today. Hiyen was in an extremely good mood. He even swung the basket one after the other. The aroma of roasted game lingered nearby, making people feel hungry. She also saw that there was a large wine jar near each bonfire. The wine was probably not good wine. The smell was a bit pungent. However, at this time, only strong wine would be comfortable. She came a bit late. She first went to find Xiao Mai and the others. When she passed by the other new recruits, they all looked at her with a strange expression. They were probably guessing what good things she would get today. Hiyen happily walked forward. When he reached a place near the foot of the mountain, he saw Xiao Mai and the others. Xiao Mai and the others were surrounding a bonfire. Hiyen waved at him from afar and called out, "Xiao Mai." When the young man heard her voice, he turned his head and looked over. However, he did not respond to her as enthusiastically as usual. He seemed to be a little hesitant. Hiyen walked closer to take a look. Other than Hong Shan and Shi Tu, Jiang Jiao, Wang Ba, and Huang Xiong were also there. The three of them gathered together. Hiyen put down the basket in his hand and sat down cross-legged. He opened the basket lid and said with a smile, "Look what I brought for you? You don't have to thank me." She picked up an exquisite moon ball and handed it to Xiao Mai. This child was used to being greedy. She said, "Here." Xiao Mai was stunned for a moment. She slowly reached out and took it. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something but did not say it. Hiyen said to the others, "If you want to eat, take it yourself." No one responded to her. Hiyen raised his head. Everyone was staring at him. The way they looked at him was a little strange. Even the carefree Hong Shan was strangely silent. Hiyen asked suspiciously, "What's wrong? Why do you all look like you've seen a ghost? Did something happen?" Hong Shan turned his head. Jiang Jiao's eyes flashed with a trace of sympathy. He said, "Hiyen, don't be sad." "Why would I be sad?" Hiyen was confused. The atmosphere was suffocating. Hiyen looked at Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong looked away and rubbed the prayer beads in front of his chest. He looked like he had nothing to do with the affairs of the world. However, Wang Ba could not help but say, "Well, even if you didn't enter the vanguard, don't be too sad. Where there's a will, there's a way." Hiyen breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I was wondering what happened. How could I not enter the vanguard?" Her words suddenly stopped. She looked at everyone. Everyone's faces were unbearable. She moved her lips and heard her own voice. It was as if it was floating in the air. "You really didn't enter? When you weren't here, Chief Instructor Shin went over there. Lei Ho entered the vanguard. You weren't mentioned." Xiao Mai carefully chose her words. Did they miss out? Hiyen still had a trace of luck in his heart. Maybe it's because I didn't come just now. I asked Chief Instructor for you. Shi Tu said softly, "In this battle for the flag, none of us entered the vanguard. Among the others, apart from the others, that Lei Ho luckily entered." Hiyen became silent. Everyone stared at him nervously. Hiyen wanted to enter the vanguard. This matter was obvious to everyone. When he first came to Liangzhou, he could barely run while carrying weights. At that time, this youth forcefully endured it for the sake of entering the vanguard. His skills were so outstanding, and he even obtained first place in the battle for the flag. Not only did he not understand, but even in the eyes of the people around him, they also felt that it was incomprehensible. "It's okay, don't be angry." Hong Shan comforted her. "Isn't it just the vanguard? We don't care. Let's go to another camp. Infantry camp, cavalry camp? As long as you have the ability, why worry about not being appreciated? He is such a fine horse. He needs to be appreciated by Bolu. If they don't want you, it's because they don't have the foresight." That's right. Jiang Jiao also felt sorry for her. He Yan was far more worthy of being an opponent than Lei Ho. "You're so strong. You're like a raging fire that can see true gold. In the future, people will know." Everyone was talking at once to comfort her. But when they saw the youth, who had always been bright and cheerful, for the first time, lowering his head and not saying a word, his entire body filled with dispiritedness and dejection, they gradually quieted down. Hong Shan poked Xiao Mai's arm, indicating for Xiao Mai to say a few words. Xiao Mai was racking her brain to think of something to say when He Yen suddenly stood up. Without saying a word, he was about to walk out. Hey, where are you going?" Huang Xiong grabbed him. The youth hatefully said, "I'm going to find Xiao Ju and ask him why he chose Lei Ho and not me. What part of me can't compare to Lei Ho? My name isn't even in the vanguard." Hong Shan was shocked. He didn't think that He Yen would angrily call out the governor's name. He hurriedly stopped He Yan's movements. "You can't be so impulsive. If you go find military governor Xiao now, it will only make him unhappy. In the future, it will be even more impossible for you to go to the vanguard." Yes. Xiao Mai clumsily tried to persuade him. "Go, military governor Xiao might be deliberately keeping you around so that you can do something else, such as go to another battalion. You're so powerful, there's no reason for him not to choose you." "I'm powerful." He Yen was so angry that his face turned green. "Let Xiao Ju stand in front of me and we fight. I don't think he'll be able to beat me." Jiang Jiao hurriedly covered He Yan's mouth. For him to say such words, it could be seen that he was really angry. Everyone was afraid that he would find trouble with Xiao Ju in a fit of anger, so they hurriedly pulled him back to his seat. Huang Xiong said, "Young man, don't be so impatient. As long as you're alive, you won't have to worry about firewood. Right now, he's the military governor and you're a new recruit. How can you speak to him as an equal? Wait until you become an official and a general in the future, then you can look at him again. Then we'll have to wait 8 to 10 years. Wang Ba muttered, "Who knows if he'll become a general?" Jiang Jiao also said, "This military governor Xiao is really something. We're clearly first, and Lei Ho was defeated by He Yen. Why would he abandon He Yen and choose Lei Ho?" "I heard," Wang Ba thought for a moment, "that Lei Ho seems to have some relationship with one of the instructors here. They might be relatives. Maybe he got in through the back door. I think these nobles have power and influence, so they don't care about the lower class." Xiao Mai couldn't help but say, "Military Governor Xiao isn't that kind of person. There must be some misunderstanding." Wang Ba rolled his eyes at him. "Whose side are you on?" Xiao Mai didn't say anything. "Everyone." He Yen suppressed his anger and said, "I have a terrible headache. Can you give me some peace and quiet for a while?" Everyone immediately fell silent. The bonfire danced in front of them. The night sky was dyed red by the flames. He Yen couldn't understand why Xiao Ju would choose Lei Ho to enter the vanguard battalion. She admitted that she had been blind for some time, but compared to Xiao Ju's blindness, she was still far from it. Could it be that she didn't perform well in the Liang Province Guard? She couldn't have performed better. Didn't she fight for many flags? She didn't leave any face for others. She even broke through a formation that a normal recruit found difficult to break. How could Xiao Ju not be moved by such a talent? She wanted to take back her words about Xiao Ju not being bad. He Yen only felt his liver hurt from anger. He didn't think that this wasn't the end. After a while, Chief Instructor Shin walked over. Under everyone's gaze, he ordered people to carry a small box over. He said to everyone, "You're all here. It's good that we won first place in this flag battle. Tonight is also the Mid-Autumn Festival. This is your prize. Xiaomai went over and opened the box. She saw a small jar of wine and a few ingots of silver inside. This is 18 immortals. Such a small jar is worth 100 taels. Chief Instructor Shin said with satisfaction. You can drink tonight. Don't be greedy. 18 immortals. Wang Ba smacked his lips. I didn't think that I would be able to drink 18 immortals here. My life was worth it. In an instant he forgot who was the one who had just cursed powerful nobles. Huang Xiong also swallowed. They were all heroes and loved wine. Moreover, it was precious wine. Even someone as young as Xiaomai who didn't like wine grabbed an ingot of silver and took a bite. This prize wasn't big, but it definitely wasn't small. Among the joy, He Yen appeared particularly unique. She only glanced at the box and suddenly laughed. It seems that our commander-in-chief doesn't have a good life. Shen Han was stunned. He's so poor. The young man didn't even look at him. He took a branch and fiddled with the firewood in the fire. He lowered his head and muttered to himself. Everyone could hear the sarcasm in his words. Hong Shan covered her mouth and smiled apologetically to Shen Han. This brother is drunk. He's drunk, he's talking nonsense. Chief Instructor, please don't lower yourself to the same level as a child. Shen Han inexplicably left. After Shen Han left, He Yen looked at the box on the ground and couldn't help but sneer. This little thing, are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Brother, this little thing is good enough. Huang Xiong patiently said, you're taking your anger out on him. He Yen was suppressing her anger and didn't want to speak. Huang Xiong sat down beside her and held her shoulder. Looking at the dancing flames in front of him, he said in a low voice, young person, don't be disheartened. It's just that you've encountered a hurdle. Look at me. He pointed to himself. You've only lost a chance to enter the vanguard. Back then I had nothing. He couldn't bear to touch the jar of 18 immortals. He only took the jar of yellow wine and poured 2 large bowls. He gave one to He Yen and took the other for himself. He tasted a mouthful saying, such strong wine. Seeing that He Yen didn't speak, he pointed to the prayer beads around his neck, saying, this is my mother's. The prayer beads were dark and flashed with a warm light. It was extremely incompatible with his valiant physique, but she had never seen Huang Xiong take it out before. He then pointed to the blade beside him. This blade has killed 19 people. These words were somewhat frightening. For a moment, even Wang Ba and the others looked at him. The light in He Yan's eyes moved slightly, looking at her. Seeing that she finally reacted, Huang Xiong said in a low, muffled voice, back then, I was as old as you. Our family had a blade manual that was passed down from our ancestors. After someone found out, they came to buy it. My father refused to sell it. At that time, my companions and I went outside to cool off. After we came back, our entire family was silenced. All of our belongings were still in the house, but the blade manual was missing. Xiaomai cried out in alarm, this is, for the blade manual, someone exterminated my entire Huang family. When Huang Xiong said this, his expression was very calm. She didn't know if it was because too much time had passed, or if it was because of something else. He said, I reported it to the government, but the local officials couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, I personally investigated it. I used up all of my family's wealth and carried a blade for 1,000 li alone, searching for traces of the culprits. After a full 3 years, I finally found where they were. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to take revenge and would instead lose my life. I wasn't afraid of death, but I didn't want to die in vain. I was the only one left in the Huang family. If I died, no one would seek justice for them. Therefore, I pretended to be a coolie and entered that family's house. During the day, I observed the terrain and their daily habits. At night, I practiced my blade skills. A year and a half later, I found an opportunity and took revenge for my Huang family in one night. This story was thrilling, but he told it in a casual manner. The danger in it could be imagined. However, the bald man's eyes were only calm. He looked at He Yen and said, 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge. If I risked my life to seek justice from them at that time, in the end, it would only be a life and death struggle. But now you see, the enemy is dead, and I'm still alive. I can even drink wine and eat meat with you here. Tell me, who won? He wanted to use his own matter to tell He Yen not to act on impulse. He Yen smiled and was about to speak when he saw Jiang Jiao reach out and pour himself a bowl of yellow wine. He raised his head and took a big gulp. He was not as good at drinking as Huang Xiong. His face was red from the spiciness of the wine. He reached out to wipe the wine stain on his lips and blurted out, "That's right. Who doesn't feel sad at times? What are you doing? Look at me, the young master of the martial arts school. That sounds good. I also have a fiancé." Xiao Mai widened her eyes and was about to ask, but Shirtu nudged her and made her quiet down. "Do you know how she died?" Jiang Jiao's eyes were a little red. He said in a muffled voice, "She died for love. She liked someone else and refused to marry me. She died for love with that scholar. Tell me, do you think I'm worse off than you?" No wonder Jiang Jiao, with his good looks and skills, joined the army. After this incident, he was disheartened and left his hometown. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Everyone looked at Wang Ba. Wang Ba was puzzled and then said angrily, "Why are you all looking at me? I don't have a story. Are you all crazy? Why are you talking about this nonsense? Are you all here to see who is worse off?" Chapter 86. The moon was white and the mountains were clear and spacious. The bonfire reflected the aroma of wine, and the atmosphere was elegant. The recruits lowered their heads to drink and eat meat, and raised their heads to chat and admire the moon. This became a unique scene for the Liang province guards. Sparks floated out along with the autumn wind, making people wonder if they would burn their clothes. In just a moment, they were reduced to ashes, accompanied by the soft whimpers of people. Xiao Mai sobbed, "I've forgotten what my parents look like. I'm even worse," Wang Ba said expressionlessly. "I've never seen my parents since I was born." He Yen. She raised her hand and drank a big mouthful of wine, trying to calm herself down. Originally, they were trying to comfort her, so they compared their own unhappy experiences. In the end, it became a comparison of who was more miserable. This was great. The recruits beside them were all laughing and chatting happily, but they were the only ones who were gloomy. Looking at Xiao Mai and Wang Ba who were hugging each other and crying, and then looking at young Master Jiang who was drinking alone with red eyes, He Yen was speechless. Well, she didn't know who was comforting who. Huang Xiong glanced at her and said, "Brother He, your alcohol tolerance is not bad." He Yen was stunned and looked down at herself. Unknowingly, she had already drunk 3 bowls. She didn't know how much the original lady he could drink, but she thought that the weak lady he wouldn't drink such pungent and strong alcohol with a chipped bowl. However, to the previous General Fei Hong, this was very familiar. When it was cold, when she was afraid, when she was upset, when she was hungry, if she had alcohol at hand, she could temporarily resist the difficult times. Alcohol could drive away the cold, strengthen one's courage, satisfy one's hunger, and drown one's sorrows. When she was in Shuajing, she didn't touch a single drop of alcohol, afraid that she would be exposed. When she was in the Fuyue Army and in Mo County, she gradually became used to drinking. She had also trained her alcohol tolerance. None of the young generals and new recruits in the tent could drink as much as her. Sometimes, when celebrating a great victory, she was the only one who could drink until the end. This might be the legendary Dugu Chubai. What surprised her the most was Shirtu. She had thought that Shirtu, who had grown up in the mountains and looked strong, could hold his liquor well. Unexpectedly, he fell asleep before he even finished half a bowl of wine. Was he drunk just like that? His remaining half bowl of wine was taken away by his younger brother, Xiao Mai. He drank with Wang Ba and said, "I didn't expect everyone to be in the same boat. In this case, we will be a family in the future." After saying that, he drank it all in one gulp. His nose was stung red by the spicy wine. Then, in less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he followed his elder brother and fell on his back, drunk. He Yen said, "You really are biological brothers." Wang Ba felt like he had lost a drinking buddy in such a short time, so he went to put his arm around Jiang Jiao's shoulder and handed Jiang Jiao a skewer of roasted rabbit meat, saying, "Don't just drink to drown your sorrows. Kamitsa-meat, your fiancé didn't choose you because you two weren't fated to be together." This was the first time he said something like a human. In life, meeting and parting are all fated. There's no need to force it. Jiang Jiao took the rabbit meat from him and continued to drink silently. Seeing this, Huang Xiong smiled. He looked at the moon in the sky and said to himself, "I miss my family." He Yen took out a moon ball from the basket of desserts that Cheng Lisu gave her. The moon ball was small and shaped like a water chestnut flower. On top of it was written the words, "Good flowers, full moon," in red. She took a bite and tasted the sweetness of sesame and peach kernels. "If they were still alive, I wouldn't be here. I would be in the village," Huang Xiong said. "My mother's cooking is very delicious. I want to eat her cooking." He Yen lowered her head and ate the biscuit silently. Huang Xiong asked, "What about you?" He turned his head and looked at He Yen. "How do you spend your days at this time in the past? The Mid-Autumn Festival in the past?" He Yen was a bit absent-minded. Before she joined the army, she spent the Mid-Autumn Festival with other people in the He family. But because of her special identity, people stared at her wherever she went, so she didn't have much freedom. She actually liked the hustle and bustle of the moon sacrifice ceremony, but because she was wearing a mask, it was inconvenient. She was an awkward existence in the He family. In terms of identity, she was the legitimate daughter of the first wife. But on the other hand, she didn't belong to the main branch or the second branch. When she joined the army in the Mo County for 3 years, she lived every day in fear. She didn't know when she would die on the battlefield. She didn't even want to think about the reunion during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Later, she returned to the capital and married into the Su family. Around this time last year, she was already blind. Her heart was full of hope for that person, but before she could achieve it, she fell into darkness. At that time, she thought that she couldn't get over it and that her life would be like this. On the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, she asked Su Zhiheng to take her up the mountain to worship Buddha. She hoped that Bodhisattva would bless her and let her see the light again. Su Zhiheng agreed. In fact, that day, she didn't really want to ask Bodhisattva to bless her. The tip of her tongue hurt. She accidentally bit her tongue. The sweet taste was instantly covered by the stinging pain. He Yen came back to his senses and avoided Huang Xiong's gaze. He said as if nothing had happened, "Just live like this. It's about the same as it is now. When I see you, it's like seeing myself in the past." Huang Xiong took a sip of wine and said, "You're just like me in the past." He Yen smiled and said, "Brother, my family is living well. In fact, they were living a better life than most people. But you're not satisfied." She heard Huang Xiong's voice and turned her head to look. The bald man's face showed the wisdom and vicissitudes of a middle-aged man who had experienced the hardships of life. He touched his prayer beads and said, "You haven't taken your revenge. You're not satisfied, so you're always distressed and trapped yourself." He Yan's heart moved, but he didn't say anything. "I don't know what kind of hatred you have." He looked at the moon. "Sometimes your eyes are the same as mine." He Yen was a little confused. Did she have it? She always thought that she hid it well. "One day it will be better." The bald man lowered his head and patted her shoulder. "You have to believe in this." He Yen didn't say anything. He silently picked up his bowl and drank. Huang Xiong didn't say anything. He ate meat and drank wine by himself. Wang Ba was also a little drunk. He sat there holding his head and smiled foolishly. Jiang Jiao buried his head between his knees. It wasn't clear if he was crying or sleeping. The instructors also gathered together and ate meat and drank wine around the bonfire. They finally saw the results of the hard training in the past few days on this batch of recruits. They were all a lot more relaxed. Cheng Lisu also mingled with them. He was a young master from the capital and had never tasted this kind of novel way of playing. Even the roasted rabbit legs sprinkled with coarse salt was delicious. He originally wanted to talk to He Yen when he had the time, but after drinking a mouthful of wine, he felt his legs go weak. He couldn't walk and sat back down. The instructors laughed kindly. Someone said, "Young Master Chung, you still need to practice your alcohol tolerance. With this little alcohol tolerance, you can't be a soldier of the Liang Province Guard." "I'm not a soldier of the Liang Province Guard," Ching Lisu muttered. "I just came here to have fun." This child could always say that he couldn't do it. If he was a grandson of the instructors, he would have been picked up and beaten 10 times. But this person was Xiao Ju's nephew, so everyone said, "Young Master Cheng is so open-minded. It's not good to drink too much. My wife doesn't allow me to drink. Let's all learn from young Master Cheng." "But young Master Cheng," Liang Ping asked him, "is the governor really not coming to have fun with us?" "Uncle doesn't like noisy places," Cheng Lisu replied. "He definitely won't come." Everyone felt that it was a pity. From spring to autumn, from summer to winter, it seemed like it was just the blink of an eye. The moonlight was even colder because of his guqin. The night sky was as clear as water. The sound of the guqin seemed to float endlessly in the vast sky. It made people want to cry. Suddenly, something smashed into the courtyard. It made a crisp sound and interrupted the cold sound of the guqin. Xiao Ju paused and raised his head. Through the window, he saw that something had been thrown in from outside the courtyard. He paused for a moment, stood up, and pushed the door open. At this time, a third thing came in and landed beside him. He bent down to pick it up and found that it was a stone. Slave Fei appeared from behind and said in a low voice, "Young master, outside." Xiao Ju opened the courtyard door. A young man in red stood outside. He held a small jar of wine in his hand. The cork had been removed and the fragrance was strong. It was the 18 immortals. He was generous. It was such a small jar of wine. Ordinary people would hide it for a long time before they were willing to take a sip. Looking at him, he must have drunk a lot. This person was He Yen. Xiao Ju looked at him indifferently. He Yen widened his eyes as if he just saw him clearly. He said, "Xiao Ju?" Fei knew who was behind him couldn't help but look at He Yen. He actually dared to call the young master by his name. He was really bold. "What are you doing here?" Xiao Ju asked him. "I thought about it again and again." The young man had drunk a lot of wine. His whole body reeked of alcohol, but his expression was normal. He didn't look drunk at all. It was hard to tell if he was drunk or not. He said, "You chose Lei Ho to go to the vanguard. I'm not convinced." "So Xiao Ju." His mouth curved. "Let's fight." Before he finished speaking, he pounced towards Xiao Ju. Fei knew who was behind him saw this and was about to step forward. But he heard Xiao Ju say, "Don't move." He didn't dare to move. The young man flew forward and raised his fist towards Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju dodged to the side and frowned at him. He Yen didn't have a weapon. He came empty-handed. If he was an assassin, he would be too stupid. But his words were clear and his eyes were clear. He didn't look like someone who was drunk and had gone crazy. Xiao Ju simply looked at him calmly, waiting to see what this person wanted to do. He Yan's attack didn't work. He turned around and attacked again. The young man's movements were nimble. He really wanted to fight, but his method was clumsy and crude. At first glance, it looked like a fight between students in a school. They only knew how to use their fists and feet to greet each other, but didn't care how accurate they were. Xiao Ju dodged to the side again. After 2 consecutive failed sneak attacks, He Yen doubtfully muttered to himself, "When did my skills become so bad?" Fei knew who was waiting at the side. Did this young man think that he could beat second young Master Xiao? He had long heard that this He Yen of the Liang Province Guard was arrogant and conceited. Now that he saw it, it was true. Young Master really had a good temper. He didn't throw this arrogant brat out of the door. She was defeated time and time again, but she didn't feel discouraged at all. She immediately came at Xiao Ju again, but this time, Xiao Ju dodged her again. Xiao Ju was just about to speak when she suddenly saw a black object pouncing at her from behind. She frowned, and without thinking, she drew her autumn drinking sword and slashed horizontally. Crush! That thing broke into pieces. He retreated a few steps, but it didn't touch him. He Yen, who came with the black object, couldn't dodge in time and was drenched from head to toe. The moon was full and the wind was fresh. The osmanthus had just bloomed and the fragrance of wine filled the air. The ground was littered with the fragments of the 18 immortals. Each piece was fresh and fragrant. The young man frowned and looked over. She seemed to have been awakened by the fragments of the wine jars on the ground. She looked at Xiaoju and took a step forward. She looked like a young lady whose hairpin was stepped on in the flower market and said, "If it's broken, you'll pay for it." Fei Nu looked at her and felt that this young man was really drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't be speaking so confidently and incoherently. She whispered to Xiaoju, "Young master, do you want me to take him away?" Xiaoju raised her hand to stop her and shook her head lightly. The master and servant had been together for many years. They could tell what the other was thinking with just one look. Fei Nu immediately understood why Xiaoju didn't throw He Yan out immediately. It wasn't because she had a good temper, but because she wanted to test He Yan. This young man's identity was suspicious. He was suspicious from head to toe. If she could get some information out of him while he was drunk, it would save her a lot of effort. If he pretended to be drunk tonight and did something else, then it would be even more unforgivable. Fei Nu hid in the tree and didn't say anything else. Xiaoju turned and walked into the house. As she walked, she said, "Why should I pay for it?" Hearing this, the young man rushed into Xiaoju's house. She ran so fast that she even staggered a bit. She rushed in front of Xiaoju and blocked Xiaoju's path. She said, "Do you know who I am?" Xiaoju laughed, her eyes cold. "Who are you?" He Yan slapped his thigh. "A real man never changes his name. I am He Yan, Liang Province's #1 guard." Liang Province's #1 guard? Xiaoju looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Who told you that?" "Do I need someone to tell me?" She didn't know if the young man was drunk or not, but his tone was amazing. "I know what I'm doing." Xiaoju walked around him and put down her sword. She picked up the teapot on the table and poured herself a cup of tea. She had only taken one step when the young man stuck to her like a tail. He stood in front of her and asked, "Tell me, am I short?" Did this person like to compare height with others when he was drunk? Xiaoju glanced at his hair that just reached her chest and nodded. "He Yan, I'm not short." "Xiaoju." He Yan asked her again, "Am I stupid?" Xiaoju stopped pouring tea and stared at him. She said slowly, "Stupid." "He Yan, I'm not stupid." Xiaoju suddenly regretted that she didn't throw He Yan out of the courtyard immediately. Instead, she came here to ask for trouble. Other than listening to his nonsense, she didn't seem to get any useful information. Either He Yan was too stupid, or this person was so astute that not a single drop of water could leak out. "What else do you want to say about yourself? Let's talk about it together." He lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "He Yan, I'm tall and mighty, fierce and invincible, handsome and righteous. I'm such a righteous person. Why doesn't anyone like me? Do you know how hard I work every day?" "Xiaoju, because of you, I'm very unhappy tonight. Let me ask you." She took a step forward and put as much distance between her and Xiaoju as possible. She looked up at him and asked eagerly, "Do you like me?" Xiaoju took a step back and put some distance between them. He brushed his sleeve that was out of shape because of her tugging. It was as if he had seen the plague. He replied calmly, "I'm not gay." "I'm not gay either." He Yan muttered and suddenly raised his head. His expression was sad and angry. He asked loudly, "Then why do you prefer Lei Ho over me? That person is only a little taller than me. How can he compare to me? Whether it's appearance, martial arts, or our past relationship, Xiaoju, you're too much. You have no taste. I'm very disappointed." At this moment, Shen Han, who had just walked out of the room and was about to deliver some roasted rabbit meat to Xiaoju, covered his mouth in surprise. Just now, he seemed to have heard an incredible secret. Inside the room, a young man wearing a white undershirt looked at the person in front of him speechlessly. The young man looked up at him. His eyes were bright and there was no trace of fear or hesitation in his voice. He was so calm that it made people wonder what he was thinking. What did he mean by past relationship? It was just that he had given him some medicine from the Mandarin duck pot. How could it be a past relationship? This person was too friendly. But it's nothing. The young man suddenly raised the corner of his mouth. He smiled slyly and said in a low voice, "You chose Lei Ho to enter the vanguard. Every day, I'll find Lei Ho to spar with. 10 times I'll lose 10 times. Everyone in the Liang province guards will know that Xiao Ju is blind. What will you do when the time comes?" Xiao Ju. After saying this, He Yen let out a drunken belch. His body tilted and he fell onto Xiao Ju's soft couch. When he fell, half of his body fell onto the evening fragrance zither. The strings of the zither let out an ear-piercing sound. With a clang, the zither fell to the ground. Xiao Ju stood in the middle of the room. His eyebrows were faintly twitching. He felt that today's idea of fishing for information while drunk was really terrible. Glancing at the door, he saw a figure hesitating. He said coldly, "If you don't come in, what are you doing outside?" Shen Han was startled. He trembled as he walked over. Just now, he had heard the secret at the door. When he entered the courtyard, he was seen by Fei Nu. He really didn't know whether to advance or retreat. At this moment, the commander-in-chief was in a bad mood. He shouldn't make fun of him. This subordinate brought some freshly roasted rabbit meat from outside. I thought that the commander-in-chief might not have eaten dinner, so I specially brought it over. Shen Han placed the roasted meat wrapped in oil paper on the table. "Commander-in-chief, please enjoy. This subordinate will leave first." Xiao Ju said unhappily, "Such a big living person. Can't you see him?" He indicated for Shen Han to look at He Yen. When Shen Han saw him, his heart jumped. Just now, he had heard that He Yen had a close relationship with Xiao Ju. Looking at him now, this young man was so generous as to sleep on second young Master Zhao's soft couch. That was second young Master Zhao's soft couch. Among the Liang province guards, he was probably the only one who had the guts to do so. The relationship between the two of them was indeed not ordinary. Xiao Ju walked in front of the soft couch. She lifted He Yen up by the collar and threw him in front of Shen Han. "He's your man. Take him away." I don't dare," Shen Han said. Xiao Ju, "What?" Shen Han hurriedly said, "This subordinate means that the recruits of the Liang province guards are all under the commander-in-chief. How can you say that he's my man? He's the commander-in-chief's man." Xiao Ju was so angry that she laughed. "Shen Han, you talk a lot today. This subordinate understands." Shen Han shivered. "This subordinate will take him away now." Just as he turned and walked halfway, Shen Han seemed to have thought of something. He asked, "Where does the commander-in-chief think this subordinate should send this young man?" Xiao Ju looked at him calmly. "Do you want me to send him to your house?" "No, there's no need." Shen Han's scalp went numb. He said, "He Yen, just send him back to his original room." After Shen Han left, Fei Nu walked into the room. Xiao Ju had already picked up the evening fragrance zither from the floor. Thanks to He Yan's pressure, one of the strings on the zither had broken. Looking at the broken string, the young man couldn't help but pinch his forehead. "Young master." Fei Nu looked in the direction Shen Han had left. "Head instructor Shin is a little strange today." "He's often very strange," Xiao Ju replied. "Young master, do you think He Yen was drunk today?" Xiao Ju put the zither away. Just now, He Yen had intended to drink tea, so the tea in the teacup had already turned cold. He poured away the cold tea and poured a new cup. He took a sip and said, "I'm not sure." He wasn't sure if He Yen was drunk or not, because a normal sober person probably wouldn't talk to him like this. But looking at her steps, words, and expression, there wasn't a trace of confusion. The most important thing was that tonight, other than crushing a zither, breaking a jar of wine, and saying a bunch of crazy things, he didn't do anything else, including revealing which side he was on. This was hard to understand. He seems to have some complaints about Lei Ho being able to enter the Vanguard Battalion. Fei Nu said, "He wants to enter the Vanguard Battalion." Xiao Ju mocked, "It's not just the Vanguard Battalion, he wants to get into our 9 Flags Battalion." Then, Fei Nu asked, "Should we send him to the Vanguard Battalion and beat him at his own game?" "No need," Xiao Ju said, "I have other plans." Fei Nu didn't say anything else. Xiao Ju thought about what He Yan had said just now. He wanted to find Lei Ho every day to compare notes with him, to prove that he didn't have good eyesight. This kind of shameless behavior, this person was really good at it. Looking at the mess in the house, the broken pieces of the zither were everywhere in the courtyard. He Yan actually had the face to say, "Because of you, I'm very unhappy this mid-autumn festival." It really didn't make sense. The young man stood in the house, elegant as jade, tall and straight like a pine tree. After a while, he sneered, "Crazy." Outside, Shin Han, who was carrying He Yan on his back, was also very unhappy. When the bystanders saw this, they all looked at Shin Han in surprise and said, "He Yan is drunk, why is the chief instructor still carrying him?" Shin Han's face darkened and he didn't say a word. If he hadn't discovered the relationship between He Yan and Xiao Ju, Shin Han would at most find someone to carry He Yan back. But now that he knew that the relationship between the two of them wasn't shallow, Shin Han didn't dare to neglect it. He Yan had just said that he had past friendship with Xiao Ju. It seemed that they had known each other for a long time. Why did the chief instructor pretend not to know He Yan and secretly investigate He Yan's identity? Could it be that the two of them were originally close, but there were many unforeseen events that happened along the way, resulting in their current situation? No wonder everyone in Dawei knew that military governor Xiao didn't get close to women. With such a handsome appearance and a heroic and outstanding appearance, so many women were eagerly throwing themselves at him, but he wasn't moved by countless beauties in front of him. It turned out that he didn't like women at all. When they were at Xiao Ju's door, He Yan asked, "Why do you like Lei Ho and not me?" His tone was so mournful that it could make anyone who heard it cry. Unfortunately, the chief instructor's heart was as hard as steel and he was completely unmoved. Shin Han's imagination ran wild. The more nervous he was, the more strange stories he remembered. For example, He Yan and Xiao Ju did know each other in the past and were on good terms for a period of time. But later, Xiao Ju found out that He Yan's identity was different, so she cut off her feelings for him and drew a clear line between them. He Yan was young and unsatisfied. When he found out that Xiao Ju was coming to Liangzhou, he joined the army and sought an explanation from Xiao Ju. He even trained hard and wanted to enter the vanguard battalion to make Xiao Ju look at him in a new light. He Yan indeed did well. Unfortunately, in order to avoid arousing suspicion, Xiao Ju actually picked Lei Ho's name. He Yan was heartbroken and in pain. He couldn't help but drink to drown his sorrows. After drinking, he revealed his true feelings and sought an explanation from Xiao Ju. Military Governor Xiao, whose heart was as hard as steel, flatly refused. But in the end, he still considered their old relationship and allowed He Yan to sleep on his soft couch. Very good. Shin Han applauded himself in his heart. It was very reasonable. It should be like this, not far from the truth. Chapter 87. The second day after the Mid-Autumn Festival was a rainy day. When He Yan woke up, the rest of the people were still sleeping on their beds. They were probably still drunk from the previous night. However, the order to run had been blown outside. Even if it was a rainy day, they still had to train. She climbed out of bed and woke up everyone in the house one by one. "My head is so dizzy." Xiaomai was young and could not withstand this kind of hangover. She still felt that the aftereffects were not over yet. He Gu, what are you doing?" He Yan handed her a water bag. "Quickly drink 2 mouthfuls and wash your face. It's time to run." Xiaomai took the water bag and drank in big gulps. Hong Shan saw this and laughed. "Xiaomai, you and your brother still have to practice more. How can you drink so little? You're not even as good as He Gu." Xiaomai glanced at He Yan and said, He Gu, your alcohol tolerance is so good?" It's so. He Yan said perfunctorily. She did not feel a headache at the moment. Instead, she felt refreshed. However, she had already forgotten when she returned to the house. She only remembered that she was drinking with Huang Xiong in front of the bonfire. She drank a few more bowls and seemed to have opened the 18 immortals. Oh right, where were the 18 immortals? Why didn't I see the jar of wine that military governor Xiao rewarded? Hong Shan also remembered. That's a good thing. Don't lose it. It might be at Wang Ba's place. He Yen replied. She carefully tried to recall, but she really could not remember anything. She used to be able to drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. However, that was not true. She could still get drunk if she drank too much. However, He Yen was different from other people when he was drunk. When he was drunk, his face did not show it. He looked especially sober. Previously, when he was drunk in the army, he even discussed the art of war with the military advisor in the tent for an entire night. He looked very energetic. The next day, the military advisor praised He Yen as a rare hero. In fact, He Yen did not remember what he did last night. Even if he was drunk, others could not tell. He also wouldn't walk unsteadily and speak carelessly. Therefore, no one would see her lose her composure. But what exactly did she do last night? He couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. Thus, he followed the crowd and quickly washed his face and tidied himself up. He then went outside to take the biscuits and ran away. After the rain, the ground was wet. She couldn't run too fast in case she slipped. He Yen felt that someone was looking at her while she was running. She followed the gaze and saw Chief Instructor Shin Han standing at the end of the horse path. He was staring at her without blinking with a complicated expression. Seeing He Yen looking over, Shin Han looked away. This was very strange. She was very sensitive to people's gazes. Shin Han seemed to be thinking about something. She looked at Shin Han again, but Shin Han had already walked away. Probably because He Yen's gaze on Shin Han was too obvious, a recruit running next to him said, "The chief instructor is so fierce, but he treats you quite well. What's the relationship between you two? Why is he taking care of you like this?" Taking care of me? He Yen was puzzled. How come I didn't know? If Shin Han really took care of her, he wouldn't have sent Lei Ho to the Vanguard Battalion. Last night, when we went back, we saw Chief Instructor Shin personally carry you back to your room. The recruit seemed dissatisfied. You are too ungrateful. If it were me, Shin Jiaodo would not be so considerate. He Yen was stunned. She asked, "You saw Chief Instructor Shin carry me back last night?" Yes. The recruit looked at her strangely. You don't remember? Maybe you don't remember. You were drunk. After he finished speaking, he ignored He Yan's expression and rushed ahead because his companions in front were calling him to hurry up. He Yan was left behind alone. She couldn't hide the surprise in her heart. She was drunk? Shin Han actually carried her back? What kind of logic was this? In the morning, she had asked Hong Shan and the others. Hong Shan and the others were drunk early in the morning. It was the recruits who dragged them back. When He Yen came back, no one was awake. No one knew when He Yen came back or how he came back. He Yen didn't think Shin Han was a considerate person. She thought about it, but she still couldn't figure out what had happened until the end of the run. She made up her mind. When the run was over and the drill started, she would go find Huang Xiong and the others. Maybe Huang Xiong would know. If Huang Xiong didn't know, she would directly ask Shin Han. When the run was over, everyone ran to the straw huts or tents to take shelter from the rain and drink water. Cheng Lisu came. This young man was holding an oil paper umbrella. There were several red and white koi painted on the umbrella. It was quite interesting. He couldn't find He Yen, so he asked around. Finally, he found him under the straw hut. He Dage. He shouted. He Yen didn't expect Chung Lisu to come find her. She got up and walked over to him. She asked curiously, "It's raining so heavily. Why aren't you in the house?" "This isn't the place to talk." Chung Lisu pulled her to hide under the umbrella. After searching for a long time, they found the long frame of the training field with the flag on it. Only then did they stop and look at He Yen. "I was drunk last night. This morning, I heard my uncle talking to Fei New Dage. Only then did I know that you went to find my uncle last night." "I went to find your uncle?" He Yen was shocked. That's right. He Yen didn't dare to believe it. She actually went to find Xiaoju? Now, she was quite dissatisfied with Xiaoju. It was also because of the Vanguard Battalion. She definitely didn't find Xiaoju to talk about old times and drink tea. Then, why did I find your uncle? He Yen asked slowly. Chung Lisu wanted to say something but stopped. Last night, you might have been drunk, He Yen. She made an effort to make herself smile. Go ahead, she said. You went to find my uncle and fought. You even crushed his guqin. Cheng Lisu answered honestly. He Yen closed his eyes. Who won? She asked. Cheng Lisu didn't expect He Yen to be concerned about the result at this time. He scratched his head and said, It was probably my uncle. I heard that he asked Shen Jiaodo to bring you back. He Yen. She really went to find Xiao Ju when she was drunk and lost. Now, wouldn't Xiao Ju have a bad impression of her? She would be one step further from entering the Nine Flags Battalion. He Yen suddenly felt disheartened. It was probably impossible to get close to Xiao Ju through the Nine Flags Battalion. She might as well change her path and slowly rise up the ranks like before. Although it would be slower, she didn't know what rank He Rufei would be at by the time she grew up to be able to get close to He Rufei. Cheng Lisu looked at her sympathetically and tried her best to comfort her. Big brother you don't have to be discouraged. Actually, my uncle isn't that calculative. I'm here to tell you that it's best if you don't go to my uncle these days. Otherwise, he'll be angry. That guqin is very expensive. He's already being very lenient by not asking you to pay for it. I can't afford it either. He Yen answered dejectedly. Look, things aren't that bad. Cheng Lisu added, You don't have to be too sad. I'll put in a good word for you in front of my uncle. He Yen said listlessly, Thank you very much. Cheng Lisu left. He Yen looked at the red and white koi fish disappearing into the distance and felt a wave of powerlessness. Originally, her brothers in the tent had said that drinking would make things worse. She had never taken them seriously, but now it seemed that it was true. She had only gotten drunk once in Liangzhou, and now she was in trouble. Why did Shen Han personally carry her back to her room? It was probably because he had witnessed such a chaotic moment and knew that she would never be able to get Xiao Ju's favor in the future. His official career was hopeless, so he sympathized with her and did this. He Yen thought to himself, Why don't I find an opportunity to ask Xiao Ju for forgiveness and apologize sincerely? Maybe I can salvage the situation. At this moment, Xiao Ju was sitting in front of a table in the room of the Liangzhou Right Guard Army's commander-in-chief. The invitation was sent to him by the Liangzhou County Magistrate, Sun Xiangfu. It said that in a few days, the imperial censor Yuan Baozhen from the capital would arrive in Liangzhou. Xiao Ju's nephew, Cheng Lisu, was also invited to a banquet in his residence. Fei Nu stood behind Xiao Ju and said, Young master, it's inconvenient to bring young master Cheng to the city. Perhaps it's a Hongmen banquet. I'm afraid there will be threats. Yuan Baozhen and Su Jingfu have secret connections. He's been working for Su Jingfu for a long time. Xiao Ju played with the invitation in his hand and looked at the osmanthus tree by the window. He said calmly, This time he's coming for me. However, I also want to know what kind of chess piece Su Jingfu has planted in Liangzhou. Young master, what do you mean? Fei Nu asked hesitantly. If Yuan Baozhen is working for Su Jingfu, then Sun Xiangfu might be as well. Xiao Ju curled his lips and said, The Liangzhou County Magistrate should have been changed a long time ago. Young master is planning to attend the banquet. This subordinate wants to go with you. However, young master Qing needs someone to protect him. If someone is plotting against him. He didn't finish his sentence. He was referring to He Yen. Currently, He Yen was the only person in the Liangzhou Guard whose identity was unknown and who was extremely dangerous. Moreover, young master Cheng trusts He Yen very much. If young master isn't here, if Cheng Lisu listened to He Yen and was tricked by He Yen, or even fell into He Yan's trap, it would not be worth it. When will the Wan Ying arrive in Liangzhou? Xiao Ju asked. The Wan Ying is still in Lu County. Fei Nu answered and looked at Xiao Ju. Young master, why don't we reject the invitation? No. Xiao Ju lowered his eyes. I must attend this banquet. When Cheng Lisu came back, he saw Xiao Ju sitting at his desk, reading a book. The book was a messy novel that he had secretly spent money to buy from the instructor. Cheng Lisu was shocked. Without saying anything, he went forward and said, Uncle. Xiao Ju was casually flipping through his book. Hearing this, his hand trembled. He looked at him and frowned. What are you calling for? I was wrong, Cheng Lisu said. What were you wrong about? Xiao Ju looked at him calmly. He didn't seem angry? Chen Lisu was surprised that Xiao Ju didn't scold him for not practicing his calligraphy and reading these messy novels. He guessed that Xiao Ju was in a good mood today, so he shamelessly went forward. I wasn't wrong. I'm apologizing to you on behalf of my older brother. I heard that last night my older brother wanted to fight with you. No, to learn from each other. Uncle, you weren't angry, were you? Thinking about a certain lunatic who went crazy and beat his zither last night, Xiao Ju's eyes darkened. His tone was as indifferent as ever. That's good. Uncle, you're still so generous. Cheng Lisu hurriedly flattered him. Xiao Ju glanced at him. He took out an invitation and threw it at his face. See for yourself. What's this? Cheng Lisu asked as he picked it up. Isn't this an invitation? Someone sent you an invitation. My name is on it. Are we going to Liangzhou City? That's great. I've been in the guard station all day and I'm about to grow mushrooms. Let me see. Imperial Censor Yuan Baozhen. Why does this name sound so familiar? He looked at Xiao Ju suspiciously. Uncle, who is Yuan Baozhen? You don't remember? Xiao Ju smiled and reminded him. The marriage between you and Miss Song was suggested by Lord Yuan to your father. Song Ci was Lord Yuan's superior. The Song family? Cheng Lisu loosened his grip on the invitation and it fell by his feet. He didn't seem to see it. He just stared blankly at Xiao Ju. Why would the Song family come to Liangzhou? It's not the Song family, Xiao Ju said calmly. It's Yuan Baozhen. Isn't that the same? Cheng Lisu muttered. They came to Liangzhou and invited me to a banquet. It can't be that they want to kidnap me and bring me back to Shuo capital, right? I don't want to marry her. I don't want to get married. He seemed to suddenly come back to his senses and grabbed Xiao Ju's sleeve. Uncle, you can't just watch your nephew jump into a fire pit. What does that have to do with me? Xiao Ju pulled his sleeve out of his hand and flipped through his book. It has a lot to do with you. Cheng Lisu walked around the table and came to Xiao Ju's side. Uncle, you know that I don't like Miss Song. If I marry her, I'd rather die. I'll hang myself on the day of the wedding. Uncle, you won't leave me in the lurch, right? Xiao Ju stopped what he was doing and looked at him indifferently. He pulled out the sword at his waist and placed it on the table. Cheng Lisu stuttered. What are you doing? You can kill yourself right now and see if I'll leave you in the lurch. Cheng Lisu stared at the sword and cried. Uncle, I really don't want to go back to Shuo capital. I've been with you for half a year and I'm already used to life in the Liangzhou guard station. I really can't live without you. He hugged Xiao Ju's leg and cried. Xiao Ju pressed his forehead as if he couldn't take it anymore. Get up. Cheng Lisu didn't move. I'll say it again. Get up. Cheng Lisu still hugged Xiao Ju's leg and blinked at him. Unless you promise me that you won't hand me over to the Song family. Didn't you say that you were tired of the guard station and wanted to go to Liangzhou? I don't want to anymore. The young man's voice was calm. That's the Imperial Censor Yuan Baozhen. Uncle, you're still General Fengyun Xiao Huaijin. Yuan Baozhen has seen you before and knows that you're avoiding him in Liangzhou. How about he complain to the Song family that you're neglecting him? Cheng Lisu immediately replied, How could he have seen me before? I've never seen him before. My parents can't even wait to hide my appearance. If he had seen me before, he wouldn't have recommended me to official Song. I don't look like a good match for Miss Song. Is that so? Xiao Ju's eyes flickered as he looked at the grief-stricken youth. You have to go. Since he hasn't seen you before, it's not like there's nothing we can do. Cheng Lisu's eyes widened. Find someone to replace you at the banquet. Cheng Lisu was stunned. After a while, he finally understood. This time, he stopped crying and hugging Xiao Ju's leg. He stood up and clapped his hands. Wonderful. Uncle, you're right. Since he hasn't seen me before, we can just find someone to replace me. Do you have anyone in mind? Cheng Lisu looked at him. In the Liangzhou guards, there doesn't seem to be anyone around your age and figure, Xiao Ju said. If you're too far apart, you'll be discovered. Most of the soldiers in the Liangzhou Guards barracks were burly men. Even the younger ones were mostly sturdy and tanned. Cheng Lisu was a young master from Shuojing. He was raised like a king and his skin was soft and tender. It was obvious that he was different from the new recruits in the barracks. "If you can't find him, then you should go yourself," Xiaoju said nonchalantly. "Who said I can't find him?" Cheng Lisu panicked. He suddenly had an idea. My big brother is about the same size as me." Xiaoju raised his eyebrows. He didn't deny it. "He Yan. That's right. He's my big brother. He's about the same age and figure as me. He's also smart. He'll be able to adapt and deal with Yuan Baozhen. Yuan Baozhen can take me away, but he might not be able to take my big brother away." Cheng Lisu was new to He Yan. In his opinion, other than his uncle, He Yan was the most omnipotent person in the world. He Yan could do things that other people couldn't. Seeing that Xiaoju didn't say anything, Cheng Lisu's heart tightened. He Yan went to fight with Xiaoju last night, so Xiaoju must still be angry at He Yan. He might not want to see He Yan. Just as he was thinking about how to persuade Xiaoju, he saw his young uncle close the book in his hand and say, "Okay." Cheng Lisu's words of persuasion were stuck in his throat. He only had time to say, "Huh." Xiaoju looked at him. "If you can persuade your big brother, then let him go in your place." After the afternoon practice, He Yan sat outside the martial arts field to rest. Huang Xiong and the others came to find him. They didn't say anything else. They first gave He Yan an ingot of silver that Shen Han sent over last night. Then they asked He Yan where the jar of 18 immortals went. "I remember that you took it in the end." Huang Xiong asked. "Today, I went to find a few empty jars. Let's split a bit. What do you think?" "I think it's good," He Yan said, "but we'll have to wait until the next flag competition." "What do you mean?" Wang Ba was a bit impatient. Suddenly, he understood something and looked at He Yan. You didn't drink it all, did you?" Facing everyone's burning gaze, He Yan nodded and said, "I'm really sorry. I wasn't careful and drank it all." "He Yan," Wang Ba said loudly, "you're too much. That's our flag. You drank it all yourself. Even bandits aren't as tyrannical as you." He rolled up his sleeves, wanting to hit He Yan. Halfway through, he remembered that he couldn't beat this person in front of him. He couldn't hit him, but he also couldn't not hit him. For a moment he felt very awkward. Jiang Jiao and Shi Tu didn't think much of it. They weren't greedy for wine and weren't interested in it. Therefore, they didn't say anything. Although Huang Xiong wasn't as excited as Wang Ba, his eyes were also full of blame. If it were any other day, He Yan would feel apologetic for his behavior. But these days, she had heard bad news one after another. She was a bit numb. She really didn't have the strength to deal with the thoughts of these people in front of her. So, she just sat there, not saying a word. Seeing her silent and dejected appearance, the others looked at each other in dismay. Thinking about how not being able to enter the Vanguard Battalion this time was a big blow to He Yan. Last night, he had drowned his sorrows in wine, but today he was still so dejected. But thinking about it again, his sorrows were really worth it. Other people were only willing to spend a few handfuls of rice wine, but he had spent a few hundred taels of silver. If he still couldn't get rid of his sorrows, he would have to spend a lot of money to get revenge. Just when they didn't know what to do, someone's voice broke the silence. Big brother he, so you're here." Cheng Lisu ran over, panting. There were still beads of sweat on her forehead. She must have run all the way here. Within a day, this was the second time He Yan had seen him. But as soon as she saw him, she remembered that she had offended Xiaoju last night. She suddenly felt a headache. He Yan raised her head and asked listlessly, "Why are you here?" "I came to find you because I have something to discuss with you." Cheng Lisu looked at the people around her and pulled He Yan up. "This isn't the place to talk. Big brother He, come with me." He was Xiaoju's nephew, so the others naturally didn't dare to say anything. Even though they had yet to settle the score with the 18 immortals, they could only watch as Cheng Lisu pulled He Yan away. They stayed in place and stared at each other. He Yan was pulled along by Cheng Lisu and jogged all the way to where Cheng Lisu lived. He Yan didn't want to go in. He knew that Cheng Lisu lived next door to Xiaoju. If he went in and bumped into her, wouldn't it be awkward if their eyes met? Cheng Li Su's brain was finally smart for once. Seeing that He Yen had a difficult expression and was not willing to move, she said considerately, "Don't worry, my uncle went out. There's no one here." Hearing this, He Yen walked in with her. Once inside, Cheng Li Su looked around and then closed all the doors and windows. It was as if she was going to talk about murder and arson. Seeing her like this, He Yen was speechless. "You didn't come to find me to talk about your uncle again, did you?" He Yen greeted her in advance. "Little brother Cheng, thank you for your concern, but I really don't want to hear any news about him recently. Please leave some face for her." Just as she finished speaking, she felt someone press her shoulder. Cheng Li Su turned her around and grabbed her hand tightly, pressing it against his chest. He Yen almost punched this person out of reflex. She suppressed her impulse to hit him. Although she had interacted with many men, most of them had their arms around each other's shoulders. It was very awkward to have their fingers intertwined like this. However, the young man in front of her had a clear expression. He didn't seem to realize that his actions had caused a misunderstanding. However, in his eyes, there was nothing to hide when two men were like this. "Big brother, please save little brother," Cheng Li Su said miserably. "What happened to you?" He Yen asked. "Promise me that you'll help little brother. Otherwise, big brother, you won't be able to see little brother in the future." "It's that serious?" He Yen asked, but in his heart, he didn't think much of it. Cheng Li Su had always loved to exaggerate. Even the slightest thing could be described as shocking. Moreover, if something really happened, his uncle was a little Jew. He would naturally help him plan. "Tell me what happened first. Only then can I help you think of a solution." "Big brother, do you remember that I once told you that I ran away from an arranged marriage? My family wanted to arrange a marriage for me. I really didn't want to, so I begged uncle to bring me to Liangzhou." Cheng Li Su said sadly, "Now, my family still won't let me go. The old master's colleague that they picked for me is now in Liangzhou. He sent an invitation to my uncle, asking him to attend the banquet with me. Heavens, I'm just a boy with no official position and no reputation. Why did they specifically write my name on the invitation? It's obvious that they're plotting against me. They want to kidnap me while I'm here." He made it sound like he was trying to kidnap a girl. The only thing he didn't do was go to the yamen and beat the drum. "It's not that bad," He Yen said. "If you don't want to leave, your uncle will naturally protect you. Can they forcefully take you away in front of your uncle?" Cheng Li Su didn't know if little Ju would really watch as he was taken away. Maybe she would even be happy to get rid of this burden. He coughed softly and said, "Big brother, you know that my mother has always been critical of my uncle. If he comes out for me, won't he be putting himself in a bad situation? My mother will hate him to death. I don't want to bring trouble to him." He didn't expect Cheng Li Su to be so protective of his uncle. He Yen sighed in his heart. It seemed that this was the family relationship of blood. No matter what, it couldn't be changed. "Then what do you want me to do?" she asked. "Do you want me to help you beat up that official? Beating up an official is against the law." "What are you thinking, big brother?" Cheng Li Su let go of his hand. "I'm not that kind of violent person. I'm thinking that that official hasn't seen me before and doesn't know what I look like. Big brother, we're about the same age, handsome, and have similar figures. Why don't you go to the banquet in my place? If that official wants his subordinates to catch me, with your skills, you can easily escape. If they can't catch me, it's their problem. They can't blame my uncle." "You want me to go in your place?" He Yen said, No. She turned around and wanted to leave. For some reason, she felt conflicted. Another substitute. In her previous life, she was He Rufei's substitute. Now that she could finally use her own name, why did she have to be someone else's substitute? The heavens were purposely trying to make things difficult for her. "Big brother," Cheng Li Su cried out heartbreakingly, "you really can't leave me in the lurch. Think about it. If you go to the banquet with uncle and stay by his side, you'll see him day and night. If you do a better job, uncle will see how considerate you are and change his opinion of you. Moreover, you're standing up for his nephew. Uncle will be grateful to you. Maybe Maybe he'll let you go to the Nine Flags Battalion. He Yen was speechless. Cheng Li Su was really willing to say anything just to avoid going to the banquet. Xiao Ju was not someone who would buy favors. If she stayed by Xiao Ju's side day and night, she might even provoke Xiao Ju's anger. If she did anything wrong, she would really be out of the game. Seeing that she was determined not to help, Cheng Li Su collapsed on the ground. She pointed at the top of her head and shouted, "God, why are you doing this to me? Yuan Baozhen, what kind of deep hatred did I have with you in my previous life? Why do you have to push me into the fire pit again and again?" He Yen was about to leave and was already at the door. When she heard what Cheng Li Su said, she stopped and turned around. "Did you just say Yuan Baozhen?" "Yes." Cheng Li Su looked at her and answered subconsciously, "The official who ruined my engagement is the current imperial censor Yuan Baozhen." He Yan's eyebrows twitched. After a moment, she walked quickly to Cheng Li Su and extended a hand to the youth who was sitting on the ground. "Stop crying. Isn't it just going to the banquet? I'll help you." Chapter 88. Cheng Li Su didn't dare to believe her ears when she suddenly received a promise. Only when He Yen repeated it several times and swore to the heavens did Cheng Li Su believe that he really wanted to help her. She poured a cup of tea for He Yen and offered it with both hands. "Good big brother, you really saved little brother's life. In the future, if you need my help in any way, even if I have to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire, little brother will not refuse." He Yen was about to speak when Cheng Li immediately continued, "I know that big brother's wish is to enter the Nine Flags Battalion and make a name for yourself. Don't worry, once this matter is over, I will definitely put in a good word for you in front of my uncle every day. Even if I have to copy books every day, I will help big brother settle this matter." "What I want to say is," He Yen stopped the child's ecstasy, "I have agreed to go to the banquet in your place, but you still have to convince your uncle." Was Xiao Ju someone who would agree so easily? After all, this matter sounded quite unimaginable. "Don't worry about that." Cheng Li Su happily came over and said, "I already talked to my uncle before. I only dared to come to you after my uncle agreed." "Xiao Ju agreed?" He Yen was stunned. "Perhaps she feels guilty for not letting you enter the Nine Flags Battalion before, so she wants to give you a chance to prove yourself." Cheng Li Su looked at He Yen sincerely. "So you see, big brother, you going to the banquet in my place is God's arrangement." He Yen didn't have time to pay attention to Cheng Li Su's nonsense. He was just surprised that Xiao Ju agreed so easily. This wasn't his style of doing things. Could it be that there was another trap? Seeing that He Yen was silent, Cheng Li Su became anxious again. "Big brother, are you going back on your word?" "No," He Yen said helplessly, "I'm just thinking about how to pretend to be you. After all, I'm different from you. Don't worry, that Yuan Baozhen hasn't seen my appearance, so he won't expose me. However, I still need to explain some things to you so that you won't find out. I love mushroom chicken the most, and I hate rice porridge the most." She didn't like people following her around. If she ate peanuts, she would have a rash on her face. "I have to bathe every day, change my clothes frequently, and use some incense." He Yen only saw the extravagant and luxurious life of a rich man's son. He shook his head unconsciously. Cheng Li Su talked for the time it took for a joss stick to burn. She talked until her mouth and tongue were dry before she stopped. She picked up the teacup and quickly moistened her throat. Only then did she come back to her senses. "Big brother, did you remember what I said just now?" He Yen. "I'll remember." She said, "If there's anything else you want to tell me, say it all." "Let me think about it." Cheng Li Su sat on the chair and looked at He Yen. He Yen was about the same age as him. His appearance was already outstanding among the new recruits of Liang province. However, he didn't seem to be clumsy or strong at all. Instead, he seemed to be a little thin and weak. However, this was just right for him. If he was dressed like a rich man's son, I almost forgot something important. Cheng Li Su slapped her forehead. "You can't go to the banquet dressed like this. In any case, I'm the young master of the right minister's residence. How can I dress so shabbily? Just you wait." He ran into the inner room and fiddled with something. Not long after, he came out with a bundle. These are some clothes I picked out. Take them and wear them. Our figures aren't too different, so you should be able to wear them all. Even if they're fake, big brother, you should still wear them. Other than my good looks, I don't have any other good points. If even this good point is forgotten, then wouldn't I be completely useless? Yen couldn't help but sigh in amazement at the way he described the embroidered pillow, as if he was in the right. He turned around and took out a small box from the drawer. He put some things in it and handed it to Yen. These are some hairpins, fans, jade pendants, and so on. If you want to put on an act, you have to put on a good show. These are necessary. Yen said, "You're really thoughtful." Cheng Li-su scratched her head in embarrassment. You flatter me, you flatter me." Yen put away the bundle and box, then asked, "Did you really talk to your uncle? You didn't lie to me, did you?" No, Cheng Li-su said. "Come here tomorrow morning at 7 in the morning. We can probably set off then." So soon? Yen was surprised. Originally, it was going to take a few days. Yuan Baozhen hasn't arrived in Liang province yet. However, Uncle needs to go to the city first to find a craftsman to repair his evening fragrance zither. That's why we have to go earlier. Yen thought about the zither he had crushed and fell silent. Cheng Li-su patted him on the shoulder. "Big brother I'm counting on you this time." "Thank you." Yen carried a bundle full of things back to the new recruit's bunk. Wang Ba and the others had not left yet. They were eating the moonballs that Yen had brought from Cheng Li-su last night. Seeing Yen come back with things in his hands, Wang Ba said sourly, "Oh, you went to receive filial piety again? Did young Master Ching give you food again?" Xiao Mai stared at the bundle in Yen's hands. She was almost drooling. What's so delicious in such a big bundle? Yen slammed the cloth bundle on the table. The cloth bundle was loosely tied, so when it fell apart, it revealed the things inside. It was not the food that everyone expected. It was actually some clothes and accessories. This was unexpected. After a while, Hongshan asked hesitantly, why did young Master Ching give you clothes?" "We can't wear normal clothes in the military camp. I'm going to the city with Military Governor Xiao tomorrow." Yen said, "He's probably afraid that I'll embarrass Military Governor Xiao if I dress too shabbily. That's why young Master Cheng specially gave me some clothes to decorate my appearance." "You and Military Governor Xiao?" Huang Xiong looked at him. "This is a good thing. Why do you look so unhappy?" If last night's incident did not happen, Yen would also be very happy. After all, he could get a lot of information from Xiao Ju. But after last night's incident, he was afraid that Xiao Ju would dislike him even more. Who knew if he did something wrong and angered this second young master? He could only brace himself for now. "I'm so happy that I don't know what expression to make," Yen answered. Everyone surrounded him and asked him a lot of questions. Finally, he managed to get everyone to leave. When night fell, Yen was still thinking about this matter before he went to bed. The reason why he agreed to help Cheng Li-su attend that troublesome banquet was, of course, not because he and Cheng Li-su were close brothers, nor was he so chivalrous. He only agreed because he heard Yuan Baozhen's name. Yen had seen Yuan Baozhen before. When she was conferred the title of General Feihong, Rufei received the reward on her behalf. After Yen became his daughter, he had seen this person once at the He family. At that time, Yuan Baozhen was standing with Yuanxing and his son. Yen had even bowed to him. Looking at the way Rufei spoke to him, it seemed like they were very close. Yen had thought at that time that Rufei had just received the reward. In reality, he wasn't very close to his colleagues in the Shuajing imperial court. He didn't expect that he would have a close friend so quickly. Now that Rufei's friend had come to Liangzhou, it just so happened that he had a bit of a relationship with Cheng Li-su. If he could take this opportunity to get close to Rufei and find out some information, perhaps it would be helpful for his future. If he wanted to stand out and reach a position where people would listen to him, he needed to make some contributions in the military. However, Liangzhou was thousands of li away from the capital. It was also too far away from the He family, so a lot of information couldn't be transmitted over. Yuan Baozhen's arrival in Liangzhou could be considered a pillow delivered to him when he was sleepy. However, he didn't know what Xiao Ju's intentions were. He actually agreed to Cheng Lisu's inconceivable method. He Yen couldn't understand Xiao Ju anymore. He thought that he would pick him to enter the vanguard battalion, but he picked Lei Ho. He thought that he wouldn't let him pretend to be Cheng Lisu, but he actually agreed. Next to him, he heard the sound of someone snoring in Hongshan. He Yen turned over and closed his eyes. Forget it. Since he couldn't figure it out, he would just follow him personally. Along the way, he had plenty of time to figure out what Xiao Ju was thinking. He would deal with whatever came his way. He Yen wasn't necessarily afraid. In contrast to He Yan's carefreeness, in the Liangzhou city guard station, Shen Han's face was full of astonishment. After a moment, the astonishment on his face turned into anxiety. Commander, how could you bring He Yan into the city? His identity is still unknown. If he follows you, if he makes a move against you, I won't be threatened by him, Xiao Ju said. But the candlelight in the silver lamp on the table flickered in the wind, almost going out. He flicked the wick and the room lit up again. If he's one of Su Jingfu's men, he might give himself away if he comes with me to the banquet. If he's in the guard station, you might not be able to handle him. It's safer to keep him by my side. Moreover, he curled his lips, He Yan boasts that his skills are extraordinary. This banquet at Hongmen can be used as a stepping stone. Shen Han's heart trembled. Xiao Ju wanted to use He Yan as a scapegoat. Military Governor Xiao was still the same old Military Governor Xiao. He didn't even care about their past relationship. He Yan didn't know how he had angered Xiao Ju in the past. Thinking of this, Shen Han felt a trace of sympathy for He Yan. Xiao Ju said, after I leave tomorrow, protect Cheng Lisu well. Don't let him run around. I'll leave all the matters in the guard station to you for the time being. Shen Han put away his fanciful thoughts and said, yes. The next morning, when Xiao Mai woke up, he found that the bed next to him was empty. He rubbed his eyes. It was still early, and the other people in the room hadn't woken up yet. He Yan's bedding was neatly folded, but he was nowhere to be seen. Mai Tai asked curiously, could it be that He Yan had already left? But didn't he say yesterday that he would only depart at 7 in the morning? It wasn't time yet. After a while, everyone woke up one after another and found that He Yan was gone. Hongshan said, that kid didn't leave just like that, right? He didn't even say goodbye? Did he leave because he was afraid of waking us up? Xiao Mai probed. Who knows? Shirtu, have you seen him before? Hongshan asked. Shirtu shook his head. No. The few of them looked at each other in dismay, all of them confused. That being said, they couldn't just wait for He Yan here. They still had to run later, so they all got up and washed their faces. Xiao Mai had already put on his clothes and was the first to clean up. He pushed the door open and ran out, intending to grab the hot biscuits. Shirtu and Hongshan were still washing their faces when they suddenly heard Xiao Mai shouting outside, Big brother, Brother Shan, what's wrong now? Hongshan wiped the water droplets off his face. We're washing our faces. Come out and see. Xiao Mai couldn't suppress the excitement in his voice. Hongshan looked at Shirtu in confusion. Shirtu expressed that he didn't know either. He shook the water off his hands and walked out of the room, saying, Xiao Mai, next time can you not be so? His voice came to an abrupt halt. He Yan stood facing him and said with a smile, Brother Shan, how do I look? Hongshan opened his mouth but didn't say anything for a moment. The other recruits in the room also came out one after another at this moment. When they saw He Yan, they all surrounded him with a walla sound, talking all at once. You look good. He Yan, you look like a young master from a rich family in the capital. Not just a young master from a rich family. I think it wouldn't be wrong to say that he's from the palace. Forget it. You're talking as if you've seen someone from the palace. I haven't, but I imagine someone from the palace looks like this. These clothes aren't cheap. He Yan, can I wear them too? Bah, can you wear them? Don't ruin the clothes. Go away. He Yan was surrounded by the crowd, allowing them to size him up. Hongshan and the others stood at a distance. Xiao Mai looked at He Yen with sparkling eyes and said, He Gu is so good-looking. No wonder it said that clothes make the man, and saddles make the horse. Look, you usually don't show off, but when you wear these little clothes and hairpins, you look different from us. Hong Shan touched his chin and asked Stone, Isn't that right? Sure Tu nodded. He Yen let them size him up. Then, she adjusted the bag on her shoulders and said with a smile, Before I leave, I still want to show you all. My brothers all say that I look good, so I'm relieved. I won't embarrass the Liangzhou guards. She waved her hand and said, Then I'm leaving. Everyone waved goodbye to her. While she was saying her goodbyes, Cheng Lisu had also left the house early. Shen Han was talking to Xiao Ju in the courtyard. Green Ear was eating grass with his head down. Cheng Lisu went to the stable last night to choose a beautiful red horse. She felt that the horse looked cute and smart, and was a good match for her. You're not going, so why are you choosing a horse? Xiao Ju didn't comment. Although I'm not going, my eldest brother is going on behalf of me. I can't let people say behind my back that the young master of the right minister's residence is good at martial arts, but he doesn't look good. They say that we should play to our strengths and avoid our weaknesses. I only have one strength, so of course, I have to play to it. Xiao Ju sneered, What should we do? With your eldest brother's looks, he can't help you grow. Uncle, you're wrong. Cheng Lisu looked at him seriously. I've looked carefully. My eldest brother is not bad. Although he can't be compared to you and me, he can be considered outstanding in the Liang province guards. Shen Han listened to the uncle and nephew chatting and was momentarily speechless. Just as they were talking, they saw someone coming in front of them. He said, He Yen is here. The two people who were talking turned their heads to look, and their eyes lit up. It was an autumn morning, and the air was clear. The cool autumn wind blew, refreshing the heart. The sun had not completely risen, and only a small head peeked out. A ray of golden light fell on the youth's body, making her stand out. The youth wore a dark red brocade robe with a cicada pattern and a belt around her waist. Normally she was too thin and weak. Wearing Cheng Lisu's clothes, her weakness was completely hidden, leaving only her elegance. She was born delicate and pretty. With her long hair tied up with a carved wooden hairpin, she looked fresh and energetic. Her footsteps were leisurely, and she carried a bag. She was completely different from the sweaty new recruits on the training field. She was the living image of an elegant youth in the capital's academy. Her every frown and smile was poetic. The youth walked in front of them and opened the fan in her hand with a pa sound. The fan fluttered elegantly, and her smile was even more eye-catching than the landscape painting on the fan. She deliberately lowered her voice. Sorry I'm late. Cheng Lisu stared at him with wide eyes. After a while, she finally regained her senses. She circled around He Yen and was unable to contain her joy. Eldest brother, I didn't expect you to be such a handsome man. The Liang province guards have really buried your charm. Looking at you now, you're almost catching up to me. He Yen was pleased with himself, but he still said humbly, You're too kind. You're too kind. She went to the riverside early in the morning and changed her clothes when no one was around. Cheng Lisu's clothes were mostly yellow. This youth loved bright colors, but He Yen felt that it was a bit frivolous. It wasn't easy for her to find a color that wasn't so flashy. She also picked out a simple hairpin from the box. She stood by the riverside and looked at the surface of the river for a long time. In order to ensure that nothing unexpected happened, she even showed it to Hong Shan and the others. The new recruits of the Liang province guards all applauded. She thought that it wasn't bad. In her previous life, when she disguised herself as a man, she had no choice but to wear a mask. Now that she could openly look like a young master, she felt a strange sense of nervousness. Shen Han looked at He Yen from the side and sucked in a breath of cold air in his heart. He originally thought that He Yen was just a youth. Even if he had feelings for Xiao Ju in the past, how could he have caught Xiao Ju's eye? After all, there were countless beautiful women who admired Xiao Ju. Now that he saw He Yen like this, he understood a little. It was normal for a woman to be so beautiful, but it was rare for a man to be so beautiful. Moreover, This youth's skills were outstanding and his temperament was good. If it wasn't for his identity being suspicious, in fact, it wouldn't be strange for him to stand together with military governor Xiao. Cheng Lisu was still talking endlessly. He Yen looked at Xiao Ju and saw that Xiao Ju was still standing in the same place. Her gaze swept over him calmly, without the slightest hint of appreciation. He immediately felt mischievous and walked over to Xiao Ju's side. Military governor. She half opened her folding fan and covered her face as she laughed softly. She looked like a lecher who was teasing a woman from a good family. What do you think of me? The young man looked at her indifferently. After a moment, he bent down slightly and lowered his head until it was almost at her ear. His voice was lower and hoarser than normal youths when he was young. Now that he was older, there was a hint of laziness and magnetism in his voice. You actually... He Yen seemed to be able to feel the other's hot breath by his ear. He Yen inexplicably felt his face blush. He thought to himself, to hear this face praise someone with this kind of tone, not everyone could withstand it. You're even shorter than Cheng Lisu. He finished the rest of his sentence. He Yen took 2 steps back and looked at him in disbelief. Shouldn't normal people say, you're actually so eye-catching, or, you're actually so stunning? Shorter than Cheng Lisu? The handsome young man looked as if he didn't think he was bad enough. He looked at her and curled his lips. Also, you're wearing your belt the wrong way. He brushed past her and walked forward. He Yen looked down. Cheng Lisu's clothes were complicated. She had never worn this kind of clothes before and didn't know how to tie it. Now that she heard the reminder, she hurriedly undid it. When Cheng Lisu saw this, she finally understood and came over to help. I forgot to tell you. My belt is different from other people's. You have to tie it like this? He Yen looked at Xiao Ju's back and gritted his teeth. Xiao Ju definitely didn't let her be Cheng Lisu's substitute because he felt guilty towards her during the battle for the flag. He Yen seriously suspected that he brought her along just to make it easier for him to humiliate and torture her. They were really born to be enemies. The Liangzhou guards arrived at the city and rode non-stop. It took about 6 hours. They set out in the morning and arrived in the afternoon. Other than He Yen and Xiao Ju, there was also a guard named Fei Nu. Probably because she wasn't the real Cheng Lisu, they didn't even need a carriage. They rode all the way and didn't even have time to eat. They finally arrived at the city in the afternoon. The last time He Yen came to Liangzhou City, he had just arrived with the new recruits from Shuojing. However, he didn't stop in the city and went directly to the guard station at the foot of Mount Baiyue. Now, she changed into the clothes of a normal young master and came to the bustling city. Unlike Shuojing, Liangzhou had a different style. This place was in the east and had 4 distinct seasons. Although it wasn't as prosperous as the capital, it could still be considered lively. People came and went hurriedly. In the city, they didn't have to ride as fast. He Yen looked around as he walked and felt that he couldn't get enough of it. However, Xiao Ju didn't come to the city to sightsee. They arrived at an inn. This inn looked like it was one of the most luxurious in Liangzhou City. It had 3 floors. The exterior was decorated magnificently. When they arrived at the entrance of the inn, Xiao Ju dismounted from her horse. The waiter helped lead the horse to the stable and they walked into the main hall together. To be honest, although He Yen was the eldest young master of the He family, he had never stayed in a particularly expensive inn. Xiao Ju was as extravagant as his nephew. Even the place to rest was so particular. He Yen was thinking this when he heard Xiao Ju say to the innkeeper, 2 rooms. 2 rooms? He Yen was surprised. I'll share a room with Fei Nu. It wasn't easy for her to leave the barracks. Couldn't she have a room by herself? Cheng Lisu also told her to bathe every day. How could she bathe with Fei Nu in the room? Xiao Ju stared at her and asked, You want to share a room with me? No, He Yen said. Then I'll share a room with Fei Nu. What a joke. She wasn't that ignorant. After all, second young master Xiao was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. How could he share a room with such a crude person like her? He Yen silently cursed. Second young master Xiao should live with the bodhisattva in the temple. Just put an incense burner in front of him and he would be worshipped. Xiao Ju ignored him. The innkeeper took the money and ordered people to clean up the rooms. Since the morning, the three of them hadn't eaten lunch. They could eat on the first floor of the inn, so they planned to eat here before going upstairs. The innkeeper could probably tell that Xiaoju was either rich or noble. He stood at their table and said, "Our signature dishes are green bean noodles, steamed 5-flavored gluten, spicy shredded tripe, sesame rolls, wild duck with 8 treasures, shredded chicken with cucumber, spicy pigeon. What would you like to order?" Before Xiaoju could speak, He Yen asked loudly, "Innkeeper, do you have mushroom chicken?" "Yes, yes," the innkeeper quickly replied. Xiaoju turned her head and looked at her calmly. He Yen blinked. "What's wrong, uncle? You know that mushroom chicken is my favorite dish." Fei knew. Cheng Lisu had told her that she had to be thorough when putting on an act. Now that she was in Liangzhou City, she was no longer He Yen. She was Cheng Lisu, second young master Zhao's nephew. Was it wrong for her nephew to want to eat her favorite dish? Absolutely not. Xiaoju looked away and said, "Give him mushroom chicken." Why was she so easy to talk to? He Yan's heart skipped a beat. That's right, what if she met someone she knew here? Xiaoju couldn't deny it in front of outsiders. This time, He Yan's courage grew. She had been eating dry biscuits for so many days in the Guard Institute and had only tasted meat a few times. Since she seized this opportunity and Xiaoju did not lack money, wouldn't she be letting herself down if she didn't ruthlessly take advantage of this fat sheep? "Uncle!" He Yan's voice was crisp and sweet. She smiled and said, "I also want to eat spicy tripe, sesame rolls, wild duck with 8 treasures, shredded chicken and cucumber, steamed gluten with 5 flavors, pigeon, and what's that, mung bean noodles. I want to eat all of them." Fei Nu's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but she held herself back. It had been a long time since she met someone who wasn't afraid of death. The innkeeper was surprised at first, but then he smiled happily. He looked at He Yen as if he was looking at the god of fortune. He said to Xiaoju, "This young master has good taste. He really believes in our inn's dishes." "My apologies," Xiaoju laughed lightly. His movements were graceful, but his tone was harsh and sarcastic. He said lightly, "My nephew has not seen the world. I'm sorry for making a fool of myself." "He Yen, give me a portion of each dish." Second young master Xiao spent money like it was dirt. The innkeeper was overjoyed. He turned around and ordered the kitchen to prepare the dishes. He Yen originally wanted to tease him. He thought that it would be good enough if he could eat a few of the dishes. He didn't expect Xiaoju to be so obedient and really order a portion of each dish. Could it be that Cheng Lisu was usually so favored by her uncle? He was simply going crazy and getting whatever he wanted. Even He Yen was a little jealous. She moved closer to Xiaoju and asked carefully, "Commander-in-Chief, why are you so easy to talk to?" Xiaoju said lightly, "As an uncle, of course I can't let my nephew go hungry." This uncle really had a deep meaning behind it. He Yen pondered and pondered, but he felt that something wasn't right. She and Xiaoju were of the same generation. They were schoolmates in the past. Later on, they both became generals and were equally famous. But in this life, she first became Xiaoju's soldier and called him commander-in-chief. Now, she was Xiaoju's nephew. Even her seniority was lower than his. Xiaoju took advantage of this. She remained silent. She didn't want to call him Xiaoju anymore. Who knew that teasing Xiaoju would cause her to lose out? She was really one step behind. The innkeeper's dishes were not good, but he cooked quickly. Not long after, all the dishes were served and filled the entire table. They were so extravagant that the people around them looked at them. He Yen felt a little embarrassed and said, "Commander-in-Chief, I'm sorry for the expense." "Since you want to eat it, of course you have to eat it," Xiaoju said slowly, "but I've taught you before. Simple rules lead to prosperity. Indulgence leads to death. Don't waste it." He Yen felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the person in front of him say, "If there's a grain of rice left, you can forget about eating tomorrow." He Yen. Chapter 89. After eating, He Yen held onto the railing and went upstairs. The dishes were naturally delicious, but she ate until there was not a single grain of rice left. Even if it was a delicacy, it was still difficult to swallow in the end. She finally finished eating and got the right to eat tomorrow, but she still had to be glanced at by second young Master Xiao, who lightly mocked her by saying, "Sure enough, you're generous." If he didn't say that she shouldn't waste food, how could she be a rice bucket in front of so many people? The other diners looked at her strangely. He Yen felt embarrassed. She was too full and really didn't want to talk to Xiao Ju, so she followed the waiter upstairs. Fei Nu didn't follow, but she was too lazy to care. As soon as she entered the room, she lay down on the couch. She was really full to the point that she couldn't walk. His body felt soft and comfortable. He Yen couldn't help but roll around on the bed. So it was good to have money. Even when he went out, he could enjoy it so much. Xiao Ju's room was next door. She leaned against the wall and pricked up her ears, wanting to hear what Xiao Ju was doing. She didn't know if it was because the wall was too thick, but she couldn't hear anything. As she listened, He Yen fell asleep. She had rushed for half a day today, and when she came back, she was full and the bed was so comfortable. It was hard not to fall asleep. When He Yen woke up, the sun had completely set and the moon was out. She opened the window and saw that the lanterns downstairs were already lit. Not far away, there was the sound of singing in a restaurant. He Yen rubbed her eyes, drank a cup of water, got up and opened the door. She walked to Xiao Ju's room and knocked on the door. After a while, someone in the room said, "Come in." He Yen walked in. The room was lit, and Fei Nu was guarding the door. Xiao Ju was sitting at the table reading a book. Didn't this person feel sleepy? She didn't see him working so hard at Xianchang restaurant, but now he was working hard. He Yan's heart was filled with shame. Look, this is what it means to have endless learning. She craned her neck to see what Xiao Ju was reading, but Xiao Ju closed the book and she couldn't see anything. He looked up with a cold gaze. "What's the matter?" He Yen asked. "Commander-in-Chief, what do you do at night?" "Nothing. Are you not going out?" He said, "What do you want to say?" He Yen smiled and said, "If you don't have anything else to do, I want to go out for a walk. It's also my first time in Liangzhou City. I want to see if there are any interesting things around." She made up a story. "If I find something suitable, I'll buy some and bring it back for my fiancé." Xiao Ju didn't seem to be interested in her affairs. She said indifferently, "Up to you." He Yen was overjoyed and said, "That's great, Commander-in-Chief, I'll leave first." She practically skipped down the stairs. After she left, Xiao Ju said, Fei Nu, the imperial bodyguard, already knew and said, "Young master, I'll follow him." "Don't follow too close." He said, "Be careful not to be discovered." This subordinate understands. He Yen excitedly left the room. Yuan Baozhen hadn't arrived in Liangzhou yet. For the next few days, they would be staying in an inn. They didn't tell the county magistrate that they were coming early. Other than repairing the zither, Xiao Ju probably had other things to do. He Yen didn't plan to follow him. At least for now, Xiao Ju didn't seem to trust her at all. There was no need for her to warm up to him. She also didn't want to stay in an inn and read books like Xiao Ju. It would remind her of the terrible memories she had when she was studying at the Xianchang school. The night was perfect, so she took advantage of this time to walk around. Although Yuan Baozhen hadn't arrived in Liangzhou yet, if he wanted to know about the He family, there were other ways. Wherever there was a tavern or a tea house, as long as he shouted, "I know that recently General Fei Hong," it would lead to countless topics. She wasn't boasting, but during the years when she was most famous, many storytellers would tell stories about General Fei Hong every day. Of course, they would also tell stories about General Fengyun. At night in Liangzhou, there weren't as many people on the streets as in Shuo, but it wasn't deserted. The street vendors also sold local products. He Yen walked and looked around. She only had 1 ingot of silver that she received from the flag fight. Although Xiao Ju was her uncle, he didn't have any intention of giving her money to spend. Fortunately, He Yen had already eaten and drunk enough. He didn't want to spend money, so he just looked around and didn't buy anything. About 10 steps behind her, Fei Nu was following closely. Xiao Ju suspected that He Yan's identity was different. This time, he brought her to Liangzhou to keep an eye on her and see if she secretly contacted people from Su Jingfu. Fei Nu followed him diligently, but in the end he was still a little puzzled. This young man looked around as he walked, as if he had never been out shopping before. It was extremely novel. He said that he wanted to buy some trinkets for his fiancée, but he didn't buy a single one even though he looked around. Either he was a stingy person and couldn't even bear to give a box of cosmetics to a girl, or he was lying and was just trying to cover it up. He Yan turned around a street and walked into an alley. Fei Nu remembered Xiao Ju's words and didn't dare to follow too closely. When he estimated that He Yan was about to reach the end of the alley, he turned into the alley. As soon as he entered, he was stunned. The alley was empty, and there were only a few hanging lanterns floating in the wind. There was no one in sight. Fei Nu cursed in his heart and quickly walked to the end of the alley. There was a big road at the end of the alley, and there were crowds of people on both sides. He didn't see the young man. He was discovered. He clenched his fists. Not only that, but he also lost him. He Yan flicked his sleeves and walked forward without saying a word. Liangzhou City didn't look very peaceful, and there were many bandits and thieves. She had just arrived and hadn't familiarized herself with the place yet, but someone was already following her. The other party had been following her all the way. She thought that she hadn't offended anyone yet, so they probably wanted to take advantage of her. However, she was still keeping an eye on Cheng Lisu's identity, and Xiao Ju was still at the inn. It was better not to cause trouble. Therefore, she didn't make a move. She didn't even meet the other party face to face. She just quietly got rid of the person behind her. Without a tail, it was easier to walk around. However, searching like this wasn't a solution. He Yan stopped a passerby on the street and smiled. "Brother, do you know where the largest restaurant in the city is?" That person looked at He Yan from head to toe. Seeing that He Yan was dressed luxuriously and had an extraordinary appearance, he guessed that He Yan was the young master of some rich family. His tone was especially good as he said, "The biggest tavern is the 10,000 Flowers Pavilion." "Thank you," He Yan asked again. "May I ask how to get to Wanhua Pavilion?" "It's not far. Follow this street and walk until you reach the end. You'll see a rice shop. Turn left and you'll see it not far away." "Thank you, brother." He Yan cupped his hands again and then walked forward with a smile on his face. It was exactly as that person had said. Indeed, it didn't take long. If you walked along the left side of the rice shop, you could hear the sound of a pipa. There were many young masters dressed in luxurious clothing walking in that direction. Needless to say, it was Wanhua Pavilion. He Yan followed the crowd and walked inside. Before he reached the entrance, he could smell a fragrant wind. He Yan paused and felt that it was a little strange. At this time, a red fragrant wind blew in front of him. A snow-white arm wrapped around his shoulder and the woman's charming smile was a little flirtatious. "Young master, you're new. Is this your first time in our Wanhua Pavilion?" He Yan, wasn't she asking about the largest restaurant? Could anyone tell her why the Wanhua Pavilion that person mentioned was actually a brothel? He Yan said, "I'm not here." She tried to push the girl's hand away. However, when the girl heard this, not only did she not get angry, she even pressed closer. He Yan's arm touched a ball of softness and he immediately felt embarrassed. Even though they were both girls, this was too intimate. The girl in red hugged He Yan and walked inside. As they walked, she said, "If you're not here, you can come in and take a look. Our Wanhua Pavilion is very fun." The other party was a girl and he couldn't deal with her the same way he dealt with Wang Jiugui. He Yan had no choice but to say, "Miss, I don't have any money. I'm very poor." The girl glanced at his clothes from head to toe and chuckled, "Young master really knows how to joke. You can't be so stingy. If you're really stingy, it's fine. Yun Yan will treat young master to a drink today and won't accept any money. How about it?" He Yan was dizzy from the strong fragrance of the incense on her body. He wasn't paying attention and was pulled into Wanhua Pavilion by this girl called Yun Yan. As soon as he entered, he felt a warm and fragrant wind blow against his face. On the stage, there was a young girl in thin clothes playing the zither and singing. A group of young masters sat below the stage and cheered, throwing couplets and indulging in a life of luxury. There were people everywhere. Yen hadn't seen such a scene in a long time. He stopped in his tracks and didn't know where to go. Seeing this, Yen covered her mouth and giggled. She pulled Yen's arm again. "Young master, let's go upstairs. There are too many people here. Young master is so handsome, I'm afraid someone will come and snatch you." After saying this, she touched Yen's face. Yen felt a chill run down his spine, like a rabbit entering a wolf's den. He felt uncomfortable all over. However, Yen was a passionate person. She didn't care about Yen's expression and pulled Yen upstairs. Wanhua Pavilion had several floors. The lowest floor was a long stage where the girls of the brothel played and sang. Further up were the elegant rooms, which required even more silver. They were used to entertain important guests. Further up were the rooms where the girls lived. In Wanhua Pavilion, Yan's appearance wasn't outstanding and there weren't many guests who came to take care of her. Today, she finally managed to catch a rich young master like Yen at the door. How could she let him go so easily? Yen had delicate features. If this kind of person was seen by other girls, they would inevitably try to snatch him away. There were too many monks and too little gruel. Of course, she had to take the initiative and lock him in her room. She kept pulling Yen's arm and refused to let go. Yen pondered how to get away naturally. When he reached the second floor, he didn't see the guest hugging the girl. "There's no one upstairs?" Yen asked. Yen laughed. "Not everyone can enter a girl's room. Young master, don't take advantage of her." The girls here were fierce and bold. Yen didn't know how to deal with them. When he passed by a room, the door suddenly opened and a person with disheveled hair rushed out. She had just reached the door when someone grabbed her hair and dragged her back. Yen didn't have time to take a closer look before the door was slammed shut. It almost hit her nose and knocked her fan out of her hand. Everything happened too quickly. Yen was stunned for a moment. Yen hurried forward and asked, "Young master, are you all right? Did I hurt you just now?" Yen shook his head and bent down to pick up the fan. He then turned his head to look at the closed door. Her hearing was excellent. She could faintly hear a woman crying from inside, followed by the sound of a servant scolding someone. "Here." Yen reached out to push the door. "Young master, you can't." Yen stopped him. "What are you doing?" Her gaze was guarded. Yen's heart skipped a beat. When he looked up again, his eyes were full of curiosity. Who's inside? What were they doing just now? After all, it was her first time in a brothel. She didn't know anything. Yan's heart flashed with a trace of contempt. She smiled and took Yan's arm again. "It's our new girl. She doesn't know the rules and offended a guest. The servant is teaching her." "There are girls in your brothel who don't know the rules?" Yen said calmly. "I thought they were all as understanding as you." Yan's face lit up with joy. She rebuked, "Young master has such a sweet mouth. We grew up in a brothel. If we don't know the rules, we won't eat. Naturally, we don't dare to offend guests. But some people are different. They have never suffered before. When faced with a sudden change, they think they are still the young ladies of the past. They are arrogant and willful. They will always suffer. After a few times, they will understand." Yen raised his eyebrows. "So you are from a good family." "Young master," Yen pretended to be angry. She lightly punched Yen's chest and said, "Are you saying that you don't like the girls in our brothel?" Yen chuckled. "How can that be? Compared to a wild cat with claws, of course a well-behaved girl is more lovable." She was born delicate and pretty. Wearing Cheng-Li's clothes, she looked like an elegant young man. If she deliberately pretended to be elegant, she could charm a large number of young women. Sure enough, Yen was dazzled by her smile. Unconsciously, she became more talkative. Even so, there are some people who like this wild cat with a temper. Don't look at how the people in this room don't know the rules. Now, the young master of our Liangzhou's county magistrate wants her. I don't know where this luck came from. At this point, there was a hint of jealousy in her voice. The young master of the county magistrate? Yan's heart was in turmoil. His expression did not reveal any flaws. He looked at her in surprise. The people in this room are so beautiful that even the young master of the county magistrate came here because of her reputation? What do you mean by that? Yun Yen did not think much of it. When this girl first came to our pavilion, mother wanted her to receive a guest. The guest was young Master Sunday. Who knew that she would be so fierce? Not only did she not serve young Master Sun, she even used a hairpin to stab young Master Sun's arm. Young Master Sun is the county magistrate's only son. How can we just let it go like this? Let mother train this girl for a few days. When she is obedient, we will send her to him. As Yun Yen walked forward, she said, "But this girl has a backbone. It has been 3 days, but she was still like this just now. It has been a long time since we have seen such an unyielding girl in our Wanhua pavilion. What should we do?" He Yen waved his fan and said worriedly, "If she is not trained well, how will you explain to young Master Sun?" Young Master is joking. There are no girls in Wanhua pavilion that cannot be trained. No matter how unyielding a girl is, if she is drugged, she will not be able to do anything. I think this girl is asking for trouble. If she was obedient and coaxed young Master Sun, she might even be able to become a concubine. But now, even if she is on young Master Sun's bed, she will not be able to win his favor. Who knows how miserable her fate will be? As she said this, she felt jealous and somewhat sympathetic. Maybe she will think it through in a few days. He Yen comforted, "Don't worry too much." Yun Yen shook her head, "I am afraid there is no time. Soon, young Master Sun's people will come to pick her up. Just now, I was putting on makeup." He Yen did not say anything. Yun Yen seemed to have realized that she had said too much. She showed her initial charming smile and pulled He Yen to a room at the end of the hall. She pushed He Yen in and said, "Look, how can we talk about other people's affairs? Young master, why don't we talk about us?" This was a woman's boudoir. It was not very big. There was some rouge and face powder on the dressing table, and the hibiscus curtain was red. She suddenly felt that the night of spring was too short. She put her hands around He Yan's neck again. He Yan's scalp was numb, but he still maintained the attitude of a romantic young master. He smiled and said, "It is good to have a beauty in my arms, but don't you feel that something is missing?" Yun Yen asked, "What is it?" "Of course it is wine. I feel like old friends with you at first sight. In this situation, we should drink a cup together." She thought about the scene of He Yuanliang playing with the concubines in the Fu and tapped Yun Yan's nose. "Didn't you want to treat this young master to wine? Are you lying to me?" A romantic and handsome young man was flirting with her. Even a woman of pleasure could not help but feel her heart flutter. Yun Yen stomped her foot and said, "Why would I? Wait here, I will go get the wine now. Tonight, we will drink until we are drunk." She gave him a flirtatious look and walked out the door. After she left, He Yen sat down on the chair and let out a sigh of relief. Imitating men in the brothel, whether it was in the past or now, was not something she was good at. It was really killing her. It was even more frightening than going to the Xianchang school to study. She flicked her sleeve again, and a small ball of paper rolled out from her sleeve. Just now, when they passed by the room, someone suddenly rushed out and was caught. In that extremely short period of time, a ball of paper was thrown out. At that time, she was afraid that Yun Yen would find out, so she threw her fan down and covered the ball of paper. When she bent down to pick up the fan, she also picked up the ball of paper. She was afraid that Yun Yen would find out, so she did not dare to take it out until now. The ball of paper was crumpled and scattered. He Yen opened it and saw 2 words written on it. "Save me." The handwriting was written with eyebrows and was a little blurry. The person who wrote it must be very nervous. Even so, he could see that the hairpin's small regular script was very beautiful. There was a girl locked up in that room. Although Yun Yen said it in a dignified manner, in the end, it was nothing more than forcing a good girl into prostitution. Now that she was by Xiao Ju's side, she should not care about these things to avoid trouble. But since she found out about this, she had a lot of resentment in her heart and could not stand by and do nothing. He Yen put away the ball of paper, stood up, and left. When Yun Yen came back with the wine, the room was already empty. She was stunned for a while, then stomped her foot and scolded, "Liar!" The night gradually deepened. The singing in the Wanhua pavilion became more and more flirtatious. Men and women huddled together, talking and laughing intimately. It was hard to tell if they were just putting on a show or if they were sincere. The moon here was not as clear as in the city. Probably because there were no mountains or rivers, it was less spacious and more blurred. In the tea house opposite the Wanhua pavilion, a young man in brocade clothes was sitting and drinking tea. In the end, Hien could not bear to use the silver ingot. So, he took a button from Ching Li Su's clothes. The button was inlaid with gold. Hien used this button to buy a cup of tea, the cheapest kind. The owner of the tea house had probably never seen such a weirdo who was dressed in luxurious clothes but had to pull off the buttons to pay. He looked at her with a somewhat indescribable gaze and only said, "Little brother, you should keep the buttons for yourself. This cup of tea is for you to drink. It's free." Hien. "Thank you very much." She slowly put the button back into her pocket, thinking that she would sew it back on for Ching Li after a while. Why later? Naturally, it was because she had to go out in the next few days. What if she wanted to drink tea again? She did not want to have to pull it off a second time. If Cheng Li Su knew that Hien had such thoughts, she would probably regret lending her clothes. As the night deepened, the Wanhua pavilion became more lively. More and more guests came to the pavilion, and very few people went home. With a warm and fragrant woman in his arms, he naturally did not want to go home. At this time, someone came out of the Wanhua pavilion and saw very clearly. A carriage stopped in front of the Wanhua pavilion. Two fat nannies helped a woman out. Half of the woman's body was leaning on one of the nannies, and she seemed to be drunk. Hien took a closer look. Instead of saying that the two nannies were helping her out, it was more accurate to say that they were holding her up. This was probably the strong-willed girl that Yun Yen mentioned that the young master had taken a fancy to. The strong-willed girl was put into the carriage, and the carriage took her away. In addition to the coachman, there were two people who looked like bodyguards following beside him. They looked like escorts. Hien spat in her heart. They were really treating people like goods. She put down the teacup in her hand and quietly followed them. There were not many lanterns on the streets in Liangzhou City, so the night was especially dark. Hien felt that the carriage almost merged with the night. The two guards sat on the ruts of the carriage and talked. "She's much more obedient today. She didn't even make a sound. Do you think she will have a good time after entering the Wanhua pavilion? This girl is too ignorant. If she had been obedient earlier, she wouldn't have had to suffer all this torture. Didn't she say that she's a young lady from a rich family? It's normal for her to take things too hard. But this is good. The young master doesn't like her. After tonight, perhaps you and I will benefit." The two guards looked at each other and laughed obscenely. Just as they were talking, the carriage suddenly tilted forward, and the two of them almost fell off. One of them scolded, "Hey, what's going on?" They looked up. He saw a person sitting under the low eaves of the house. He was wearing a brocade robe with his hair tied up. Half of his face was covered with a handkerchief, and only a pair of eyes could be seen. He seemed to be smiling, but because of the darkness, they could not see clearly. He was tossing a few pieces of shirtu in his hand. The carriage stopped because a piece of shirtu had scratched the wheel, and the carriage could not move. "For you." The guard got off the carriage and shouted, "Is there something wrong with your head?" The man spoke in a low voice, but it could not hide the arrogance in his words. He pointed at himself and said, "I'm dressed like this. Of course, I'm robbing." Robbing? In broad daylight? No, it was a dark and windy night. But in Liangzhou City, this word had not been heard for a long time. More importantly, there was someone in Liangzhou City who dared to rob them? "I think you're tired of living." The guard sneered. "Do you know who we are?" "Yes," the man said lazily, "Magistrate's son, a member of the Sun family." "If you know, how dare you?" "Yes, I dare." His words were interrupted by someone. The next moment he saw that person rush down from the eaves and rush over. It was late at night, and there was no one on the road. The coachman was so scared that he had abandoned the carriage and ran away. The two guards did not stop there. In an instant, the three of them were entangled in a fight. The noise outside seemed to have alarmed the person in the carriage. There was also a rustling sound in the carriage, and the person inside seemed to want to come out. Hien shouted, "Stay inside and don't move." Suddenly, the sound disappeared, and the person stopped moving. One of the guards seemed to have realized something. "You're her lover. Well, you said you were robbing. So you're in cahoots. Is the Sun family's brain made of paste?" Hien exclaimed and punched the guard in the face. The guard fell to the ground and could not get up for a long time. The other guard rushed over with a knife. Unfortunately, his strength was enough to defeat ordinary people, but it was not enough in front of Hien. Hien smiled and grabbed the guard's wrist. The guard only had time to scream and the knife in his hand fell. Hien kicked him a few meters away. Although these two guards were the little young master's guards, Hien did not feel that they were good at fighting. They probably just came out to pick someone up and sent two guards. Who would have thought that in the Sun family's territory, there would be someone so daring and fearless to intercept? She bent down and picked up the knife that had just fallen on the ground. The two guards were beaten up and had no strength to fight back. Seeing the masked man approaching step by step, they subconsciously retreated. One of them said, "Let's talk nicely. Don't be impulsive." Here. This was one who spoke softly. There was another person who didn't show any fear, but it was unknown if he was just putting on a strong front but cowardly inside. He looked at Hien and sneered, "Stinky brat, you've got guts, daring to touch the Sun family's people. You have to know that if you intercept someone tonight, it will be your turn tomorrow. You're in big trouble." Hien did not look at them and approached step by step. When the two of them were pale, she cut the rope that connected the carriage to the horse. "I'm afraid?" After that, she directly stretched out her hand and pulled the person out of the carriage. The woman was drugged and could not move at all. She stared at Hien with her eyes wide open. Hien helped her get on the horse and followed her. He raised the whip and quickly disappeared into the night. Chapter 90. The horse galloped in the silent night. After an unknown amount of time, Hien pulled on the reins and stopped the horse. This place was an empty market. The peddlers had already returned home. This strong-willed girl had been trembling since she got on the carriage. Now that the drug had worn off a little, she could speak again. Her voice was soft and weak as she said, "Let go of me." Hien helped her off the horse and sat down in front of a tofu shop. Just now, he was in a hurry and didn't take a good look at this girl's appearance. Now, with the weak light of the lanterns hanging under the eaves of the tofu shop, he could see that this girl was indeed beautiful. She was delicate and soft, white and tender, with delicate eyebrows. Her cheeks were a little chubby and she looked a little childish. She shouldn't be too old, at most about the same age as Chung Li-su. She was such a young girl, but she was dressed like a demon by the people of Wanhua Pavilion. She wore an inappropriate thin gauze dress and heavy makeup. She was so cold that she was shivering. As soon as he sat down, the girl shrank back and looked at Hien with vigilance. "Who are you?" Hien was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses, he thought that this girl must have thought that he was a flower thief. He took off his scarf and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. I'm someone who came to save you. It's just that it wasn't convenient for me to show my face, so I used a scarf to cover my face. I didn't scare you, did I?" Under the moonlight, the young man who took off his scarf had delicate eyebrows. His soft voice made people gradually let down their guard. "How did you know?" She was still struggling to speak. Hien took out a ball of paper from his sleeve. "The one you threw out, I picked it up. I heard that Wanhua Pavilion forced girls into prostitution, so I hid it in the tea house next to Wanhua Pavilion. I followed the carriage that took you away." Hien looked at the girl. "Are you okay? They didn't hurt you, right?" It would have been better if he didn't say this. As soon as he said this, the girl's eyes turned red. She trembled as she reached out her hand. Her 10 fingers were shockingly swollen. She didn't know what had pinched her. The girls in the brothel, especially the newcomers, even if they didn't know the rules, they should be taught a lesson. Their mother wouldn't use methods that would leave marks on their bodies. After all, the girls still had to go out to entertain guests. If she had bruises on her body, the guest's appetite, the loss would not be worth it. Therefore, she came up with this method of torture. Yen felt a bit of heartache. Whose family's daughter was ruined like this? Her parents' hearts were about to break. She softened her voice and asked, "Miss, where is your home? I'll send you home first." The girl was stunned for a moment and looked at Yen. After a while, she answered, "My home is in Shuajing. And, bye." The little girl said, I escaped from my marriage. Originally, I wanted to go to Yangzhou, but halfway through, I got the wrong direction and came to Liangzhou. Originally, I only wanted to stay in Liangzhou for a few days, but I didn't expect to be seen by Sun Ling. She hatefully said, "If I return to the capital, I will definitely teach them a lesson." Yen. This little girl looked weak and delicate, but her guts were too big. She dared to run from Shuo to Liangzhou? What's wrong? Is it the trend in the capital to run away from marriage? Cheng Li was like this, and now this girl was also like this. Yen said, "Did you come alone? Do you know anyone in Liangzhou? Do you have a place to stay?" The girl shook her head. Yen was also in a difficult situation. She was so big, could it be that he had to bring her back to the inn? Xiao Ju wouldn't beat him to death, would she? Although in a few days, they were going to County Magistrate's son's mansion for a banquet. Although she had just kidnapped someone from County Magistrate's son's son. The girl seemed to see Yan's difficulty and sat up with difficulty. She bit her lip and said, "You don't have to worry about me. I will hide myself. Your great kindness, when I return to Shuojing, I will let my parents repay you. What do you want? Gold, silver, jewels, beautiful women. What's your name? When I go back I will." "Little girl, you can't even protect yourself now." Yen held his forehead. "It's hard to say if you can even walk out of Liangzhou. Don't talk about something so far away." "So what?" The girl avoided his gaze and said with red eyes, "I won't beg you anyway." The young masters and young ladies from Shu'a all had a temper. Yen thought, it's good to be firm, but it's not good to be too firm. If Cheng Lisu was here, she would be able to adapt to circumstances. She would be able to avoid a lot of physical pain after entering Wanhua Pavilion. Yen pulled her up. "Let's go." "Where to?" "Of course to my place." "This young lady," Yen helplessly said, "I've just kidnapped you. Presumably, not long after, young Master Sun will search the entire city for your whereabouts. It's so late at night and you have nowhere to go. In the end, you will be found by Sun Ling. He'll only torture you even more. I've worked so hard for an entire night. Is this the result I want?" The girl didn't have much strength. Yen helped her onto the horse. She said hesitantly, "If you bring me home, I will bring you trouble. The Sun family is powerful in Liangzhou." This little girl's heart was clear. Yen urged his horse and said, "Don't worry, my family still has the power to cover the sky in the Great Way." If there was no other way, he could bring up Xiao Ju. Second young master Xiao was powerful in Dewei. Yen asked, "I forgot to ask you. What's your name?" "My name is Tao," she said. "Tao Tao?" The name sounded familiar. Yen thought about it carefully but couldn't remember where he had heard it before. The situation was urgent, so it wasn't the time to be fooling around. After sending Tao Tao back to the inn, he would interrogate her in detail after tonight. Yen didn't grow up in Liangzhou, so he didn't know the way to Liangzhou. Fortunately, she had a good memory. She followed the original path and found the inn they came from. Afraid that someone would discover Sun Ling's horse, he and Tao Tao dismounted far away from the inn. He patted the horses but in the opposite direction and watched it gallop into the night. Second young master Xiao was quite good at picking inns. This place wasn't as lively as the Wanhua Pavilion. It was much quieter. It was late at night and almost no one was around. When Yen helped Tao Tao upstairs, there was no one downstairs. She opened the door and found that Fei Nu wasn't there either. She sighed in relief. There was water in the room. Yen said, "Wash your face first. I have some clean clothes for you to change into. You can't wear what you're wearing. You'll catch a cold." She placed the large pile of clothes Chung Lisu gave her in Tao Tao's hands. You can choose what you like. Tao Tao looked at her and blushed. Get out. He Yen suddenly remembered that she was a man. I'll go out. I'll guard the door. Don't worry and change. After she closed the door, she thought for a moment and slipped outside Xiaoju's room. She put her ear to the door, wanting to hear if Xiaoju was there. The lights in the room were off. She didn't know if Xiaoju was asleep. He Yen whispered, Governor, Governor? There was no response. She reached out and gently knocked on the door. Still, there was no answer. He Yen stood up and hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The windows in the room weren't closed. The wind from outside leaked in. Under the moonlight, the bed was neat and tidy. There were no traces of anyone sleeping there. Xiaoju was long gone. The autumn sword he left on the table was also gone. This person and the sword never left their hands. They must have gone out. He Yen also noticed that the familiar guqin was still on the small table next to them. He Yen pursed her lips and cursed in her heart. She said that she was here to fix the guqin, but in reality, she must be doing something confidential in Liangzhou City. Fei Nu wasn't here either. This master and servant must have gone out to do something. They didn't even bring her along. It was obvious that they didn't trust her. Although He Yen already knew that Xiaoju didn't trust him and that it was reasonable, he still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. In any case, they were schoolmates and had known each other for so many years. When they went out to do things, she wouldn't tell anyone. How petty. She left Xiaoju's room and closed the door behind her. On the other side, Tao Tao had already changed. She opened the door and saw He Yen. She lowered her head and said, I'm done. He Yen pushed her in and said, The walls have ears. Come in and talk. She lit the lights in the room. Tao Tao looked much more delicate after changing into Chung Lisu's clothes. Cheng Lisu's clothes were mostly bright and colorful. The white robe on the little girl made her look even fairer and prettier. Her eyes were still red and her hair was draped over her shoulders. She was as obedient as the snow-white bunny He Yen had seen before. He could tell that she was a pampered girl who was carefully raised by a rich family. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. But your taste in clothes is really bad. The little bunny wasn't as cute when she spoke. Tao Tao frowned and pointed at the carp on the clothes. It's really gaudy. He Yen, this young lady, what time was it that she still had the mood to look at clothes? Were all the young ladies from Shuajing like this? He Yen thought that he wasn't like this in the past either. She coughed lightly and said, We have no choice now. Miss Tao Tao, you should delay the matter of the clothes for now. She passed Chung Lisu's box of hairpins to her. First, choose one that you don't think is gaudy and tie up your hair. You can't dress up like a girl right now. Why? Tao Tao didn't understand. Sun Ling will probably send people to find you soon and capture all the women in the city who look like you. We won't be spared. Tao Tao heard this and became nervous. Then what should we do? Don't worry. I'll think of a way to send them away. It's already so late. You haven't eaten anything yet, right? I have some dry food here. Tomorrow morning, I'll ask the inn to make something hot for you to eat. There's also tea here. It's a bit cold, but help yourself. Tao Tao rubbed her stomach and felt hungry. She went to pour tea from the teapot. He Yen saw this and sighed in his heart. This girl was really naive. After the incident at Wanhua Pavilion, she was still so gullible. If she hadn't met him and had met someone else with bad intentions, they would have just needed to coax her a little and put some drugs in her tea. She wouldn't have needed to go through so much trouble to kidnap this girl. Although he had left the He family alone that year, he had followed the Fuyue army. It shouldn't have been so dangerous. In this world, it was always difficult for women. She thought to herself. She originally wanted to hide this matter from Xiaoju, but now that Xiaoju and Fei Nu weren't here, it was difficult to do so. She had originally planned that if Sun Ling's people came looking for her, Xiaoju wouldn't be able to enter the house to investigate. Now that this big Buddha was gone, if she used Xiaoju's name, others would probably think that she was lying. She could only hope that Xiaoju would come back soon. He Yen never thought that there would be a moment like this when he looked forward to second young Master Zhao's return. Tao Tao casually ate a few bites of the biscuits and drank a cup of tea before saying, "I don't want to eat anymore." From the way she wrinkled her nose in disdain, this, "I don't want to eat anymore," was definitely not because she was full, but because it didn't suit her taste. She sat in front of the table and looked at the bronze mirror to tie up her hair. After combing it for a while, she turned around and said, "I'm done." Yen also felt a little thirsty at this moment. He took a cup of tea and almost spat it out when he saw it. This child's hair was tied up in a mess, as if she had just escaped from a disaster. He couldn't help but ask, Did you tie up your hair?" "I've never combed my own hair in the fu before. It was always the servant girls who combed it for me." The little girl felt wronged and threw the comb away. "I don't know how to." Yen. He walked over helplessly and picked up the comb in a good mood. "If you don't know how to, then you don't know how to. Why are you so angry? Let me help you." After saying this, he really took Tao Tao's long hair and combed it for her. Tao Tao was stunned. The youth reflected in the bronze mirror was gentle and handsome. She couldn't help but ask, "You even know how to do this?" "I'll be able to after a few more tries." Yen replied with a smile. She had been the eldest young master of the He family for many years, but other than the first and second branches of the He family, no one else knew about her change of identity. Therefore, Yan's manservants and servant girls were never too close to her. Even the matter of tying up her hair could be exposed. Therefore, Yen began to tie up her own hair from a very young age. Not only did she have to tie her hair, but she also had to do anything that could reveal her secret. Over time, she developed a personality of doing everything by herself. Although she sometimes envied those young masters and young misses who grew up in the palm of their hands, she thought about it again. For example, if she encountered a situation like today, she wouldn't cry endlessly. There were many things that she had more confidence in relying on herself. After tying up her hair, Yen darkened her face and made her eyebrows thicker. She was already very good at this kind of woman disguising as a man. After the makeup was done, Tao Tao looked at herself in the mirror and said in a daze, Thank you, you're really good at it." Yen clapped his hands. "Practice makes perfect, that's all. Miss Tao Tao, please turn your back. I also need to change my clothes." Tonight, Liangzhou City was bustling with activity. Someone actually robbed the little child's carriage not far from County Magistrate's son's mansion. The person in the carriage was the little child's new concubine. For a moment, Liangzhou City's government officials were in chaos and swore to catch the thief. Young master, that person is clearly her lover." The guard who had been punched by Yen earlier was now kneeling on the ground and crying for justice. "They are in cahoots. They deliberately took her away. She's not even from Liangzhou. How could she have a lover?" Sun Ling kicked him. "Idiot." Sun Ling was 30 years old and had no achievements. He relied on his father, the county magistrate, to live his life. He bullied people and tyrannized women in Liangzhou City and committed all kinds of crimes. He was born with a rabbit's head and a black birthmark on his cheek, which made him look even scarier. He had countless concubines in his mansion and countless girls from good families who were bullied and abandoned by him. The people of Liangzhou City were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. They allowed him and his father to do whatever they wanted in the city. Today, however, he was robbed on his way home. Women were small things, but it was humiliating. To Sun Ling, this was a blatant disrespect for the Sun family. "The city gate has been sealed." Another guard said, "That woman is injured. She should still be in the city. We'll check door to door. We'll find her whereabouts." "Idiot," Sun Ling scolded again. "Since when did the people of Liangzhou City have the guts to mess with the Almighty? Since you said that person knew that I, Sun Ling, wanted her and still dared to make a move, he must be reckless. He's probably not from Liangzhou. That woman isn't from Liangzhou either. They might be in cahoots." The previous guard said again. "I don't care if they're in cahoots or not. If he dares to go against the Sun family, he must be prepared to die." "Say it again. What does that person look like?" His face was covered, so I couldn't see what he looked like. "He's about 7 feet tall, a head shorter than me. He's thin, but he's dressed very well. The material of his clothes doesn't look like ordinary goods. The guard racked his brains to recall. Anyway, he shouldn't be poor. Sun Ling thought for a moment and said, I understand. The two guards looked at him in unison. The people in the city continue to block the city gate. The rest of you, follow me to check the inn. Inn? Young master, why? Sun Ling scolded, idiots will always be idiots. Why don't you think about it? Since he's probably not from Liangzhou, he must be staying in an inn. Even if he's dressed well, there's no way he's staying in a shabby inn. Why don't you just look for those good inns that cost a lot of money? I see. The two guards quickly praised, young master is wise, young master is wise. Sun Ling smiled proudly. The birthmark on his cheek looked even scarier. He said darkly, when has there been such a fearless person in Liangzhou? I want to see who's so bold. And that bitch, she doesn't know what's good for her. She's done it again and again. I'm afraid she doesn't know how powerful I am. Don't let any of them go. The night in the city seemed to be lit up by torches. It was supposed to be time for bed, but every household was woken up by the sound of horse hoofs. The bailiffs and city guards rushed into the houses of the commoners and interrogated them one by one. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case. However, the Sun family had abused their power for a long time. When they heard that Sun Ling's concubine had been kidnapped, many people secretly cursed. Hey, nonsense. Where did this concubine come from? With that kind of appearance, even if her family was extremely wealthy, they wouldn't take a liking to her. They must have kidnapped some innocent girl from somewhere. How is this any different from robbers? Robbers have to pick the night to act. Who would dare to rob in broad daylight? But weren't they abducted? Which righteous person couldn't stand it anymore and took action? If it's really a righteous person, I'll pray in front of the Bodhisattva every day that he's safe and healthy and doesn't get caught by the Sun family. AI, the world has changed. These voices naturally didn't dare to appear in front of the soldiers. They waited for the people to leave before whispering to each other and quickly disappearing into the night without a trace. The inns in the city were also in trouble tonight. The shopkeepers and waiters, along with the guests upstairs, were all pulled out and interrogated one by one. Those who appeared to be well off were interrogated even more carefully. Not even a fly was spared. He Yen sat on the edge of the bed. The lights were already off, and only a little moonlight came in through the window. It was already late at night, but Xiao Ju and Fei Nu still hadn't returned. She thought to herself, are they not coming back? It was just like those poor families who couldn't afford to raise an extra child. They took their youngest son to a crowded street and lied to him that they were going to buy candy. In the blink of an eye, they were gone and abandoned by the side of the road. Did Xiao Ju abandon her? She was too pitiful. She only had so much money on her, and she still had to pay for the inn tomorrow. She still had to eat, and she still had to go back to the Liangzhou City Guards institution. Was this something that a human could do? If that was really the case, she would go next door and sell the evening zither tomorrow. He Yan's thoughts ran wild. Would this person come back or not? If not, she and Tao Tao could each have a room tonight. It wouldn't be a waste. As she was thinking, Tao Tao, who was also sitting on the edge of the bed, whispered, you won't run away, right? He Yen was astonished. They said that Sun Ling is very powerful in Liangzhou, and everyone is afraid of the Sun family's power. Before, I asked many people for help, but when they heard that it was Sun Ling, no one dared to help. When Tao Tao said this, her expression became angry. When she was stranded in the 10,000 Flowers Pavilion, she didn't fall into someone's trap right from the start. She struggled along the way and looked for opportunities to ask for help. She looked for many people. There were tall and strong warriors, and there were also scholars who were full of righteousness and honor. There were rich merchants who were old enough to be her father, and there were also chivalrous people who carried swords and traveled everywhere. She tried her best to find people who looked like they had the ability to save her, but when they heard that it was someone that Sun Ling wanted, they left with their tails between their legs. Even if she promised a lot of money and threw out her identity, no one cared about her. In the end, Tao Tao despaired. When she threw out that piece of paper, she didn't think that there would be a tomorrow. She only thought that if she saw Sun Ling, she would die with him. Who knew that at the last moment, someone would rush out? She turned her head to look at the person beside her. The young man tilted his head, thinking about something. It was very strange. Such a weak-looking young man could make her feel an inexplicable sense of security. Perhaps it was because of the gentle smile on her face, or her clear eyes. Tao Tao inexplicably trusted this person, but she was also a little worried. She said, "A strong dragon can't suppress a local snake. You know about this?" Tian smiled. "Actually, I'm also a local snake. I'm very powerful." Tao Tao saw that her expression was relaxed, so she also relaxed a little. She looked at He Yen and couldn't help but ask one last question. She asked, "The Sun family is so domineering. You're not from Liangzhou, so you don't know what kind of trouble you'll get into if you save me. They don't dare to make a move, so why did you save me?" Why did this child have so many questions? He Yen turned her head and saw the little girl looking at her with red eyes. She was curious and expectant, so she couldn't help but reach out to touch her head. "Because you're a woman," she said silently in her heart, "and I'm also a woman." The noise surrounded the entire inn. The night was illuminated red by the light of the fire. Everyone in the inn was suddenly awakened by the officers who stood at the door and questioned one by one. Sun Ling stood at the door and his gaze fell on the last room upstairs. He said, "Where's that room? Why didn't you open the door?" The innkeeper trembled as he knocked on the door. "Young master, young master?" After a while, someone shuffled to open the door. It was a delicate young man wearing an inner garment. He said sleepily, "It's so late. What's the matter?" Before he finished speaking, the officers went in to search. There was also a servant in the room, who was busy putting clothes on the young man. "Young master, don't catch a cold." The officers went in to search, but they didn't find anything. They quickly came out and shook their heads at Sun Ling. Sun Ling looked at the young man in front of him. This young man was young and seemed to be pampered. His servant was busy putting on his boots. "What are you doing?" He Yen frowned. "You didn't even greet me." "Greet?" Sun Ling sneered. "What a joke. There's no place in Liangzhou City that I, Sun Ling, need to greet." He looked at He Yen and remembered what the guard said before. He was about 7 feet tall and had a thin body. This young man was exactly like that. "What's your name?" he asked. "Cheng Li Su," He Yen answered. "Pa." The servant lost his grip on the boots and fell to the ground. Everyone followed his gaze. Sun Ling's expression changed. He suddenly said, "You, raise your head." He was referring to the servant. He Yen had a bad feeling. He asked, "What are you doing? It's broad daylight, and you still want to snatch my people? Your man?" Sun Ling stared at him with a sinister gaze. "Don't speak too early. The one on the ground, raise your head." The person on the ground didn't move. He lowered his head and looked carefully. His hands were still trembling. Seeing this, Sun Ling's expression became more ferocious. He stepped forward and was about to pull the servant's hair. The next moment, He Yen stood in front of the servant. She grabbed Sun Ling's arm. "Young master, watch your words and actions. You're the assassin who stole my concubine, aren't you?" Sun Ling laughed. His birthmark looked like a demon tattoo. "You're dead," he said. "Men, capture the two of them. Arrest me." He Yen laughed. She said, "I advise you to think twice before you act. Do you know who my uncle is?" Sun Ling asked, "Who's your uncle?" "My uncle is the General Feng Yun, the current commander-in-chief of the Right Army, 2nd Young Master Shao." "Young Master Shao, are you sure you want to arrest me?" He Yen raised his eyebrows. Sun Ling was stunned. After a moment he laughed. He laughed until tears came out. He pointed at He Yen and asked the people around him, "Did you hear that? Who did he say his uncle is?" The people around all laughed. Sun Ling stopped laughing and stared at He Yen. He said fiercely, "Since your uncle is a Shao Ju, let him come out." "So what if he's a Shao Ju? Today, in front of your uncle, I'll make you beg for death." "Is that so?" An unfamiliar voice sounded behind him. Sun Ling turned around. A young man as bright as the moon slowly walked over with guards behind him. His voice was low and had a cold, mocking tone. You can try. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.